Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Fueled by Progress, hosted by myself, Mark Joseph Szymanski. Today, we have another great guest. We're here in my parents' garage, if you're watching on YouTube.
Scenic.
And very scenic here with the garage door in the background. We have Dave Cupp. Welcome, brother.
Hello. Good to see you, Mark.
Absolutely, man. So to give a little background, and then we're just going to kind of dive into a bunch of topics that mostly Dave, but also kind of together we've thought about, and Dave's been following everything that I've been doing. I've been following everything Dave's been doing. We're excited to kind of show that to you guys and go over everything, and really just kind of chill out and have a talk. So I'm going to fill in a couple of details that I know about Dave here, just so we can kind of get him introduced, and then he can expand on that, and we'll just kind of see where it goes. So I know Dave is doing a ton of stuff on Twitch. He has, I think last time I checked, like over 10,000 followers, which is impressive because I am trying to do a bunch of different things and trying to rank up my audience on different stuff like Fueled by Progress and MJS stuff. And I know it's difficult. I know it's difficult to be consistent. I know it's difficult to consistently have content that people want to engage with and watch, and then also have the ambition and the desire to click the follow button, right? So huge kudos to Dave so far on everything he's doing there. Just started a YouTube channel as well, so that's dope. The YouTube and Twitch combination, I've heard, is tremendous in the industry. So very excited to see that. And then just a lot of other different topics. I know that we deal a bunch of stuff. I don't know the question. Maybe the first question that I have to you, Dave, and where you can kind of just take it is: do you think that Twitch, content creation, YouTube, and all these things is where you ultimately want to go? I know that's not really your full-time gig as of right now, right? So maybe that's like a segue into just more about, what you kind of got going on.
Well, I can definitely answer that question.
Yeah.
I feel like you left out one very important detail with that introduction there.
What was it?
We were former teammates, so there's
I did forget that. Yes.
little extra chemistry there.
Yeah.
But
I've known Dave for a long time. We started way back. I don't even know how long ago it was now, playing hockey.
Had to be 6 years.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So I did forget that. I apologize. But yeah.
He got a lot better than we did. I think he just was a lot better than we were.
I played a lot. It's just got to practice, I guess. I don't know.
That's with anything. So Twitch and YouTube, right? They're just platforms.
Right.
For me, I want to do content creation regardless of the platform.
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, I had many attempts at doing all kinds of things. Every trend you can think of, I've tried to make a channel for at some point.
Right.
Once I got the internet in my life as a young kid, I grabbed it and ran with it.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like a passion. It's not so much a job at this point,
Mm-hmm.
but something I'd love to do. But if Twitch and YouTube die tomorrow, I would be picking up the torch, going to the next available place.
Mm-hmm.
Just right now they're home.
Right.
But yeah, content creation in general is something I would like to do forever. Paycheck or no paycheck, I think I'm just going to find a way to get it done.
Gotcha. I think that's really good too. I mean, because that's honestly something that I'm trying to do, and I think that a lot of people would recommend that. You're trying to build the brand, right? You're trying to build the brand around you, and then your I guess your alias or your username, TheWulfeman, the Wolfman brand, right? And maybe it changes over time, but the point is that you're trying to build up you and wherever you go. You see with Twitch streamers all the time. I don't follow gaming and Twitch too much, but if one pro goes over to another and severs his alliance with Twitch and goes over to another place, he's gonna have people that follow him because they're there for that player or that that creator or whatever, not specifically the brand. Or I'm sorry, not specifically the platform. So I think that's great. I think, where do you think that you take that kind of moving forward with everything? Do you just want to do that specifically? I know you touched on a bunch of different, and you've touched on throughout your course of content creation a bunch of different niches, but what's resonating with you right now?
Well, it's kind of the generic thing to say these days. I've always been a avid gamer, played them my entire life. And that doesn't just sit with video games either. If it's a sport, I'll try it once for sure. If it's a board game, I'll be there.
Right.
am one of those people where if there is a objective based strategy or some kind of skill based challenge, like I'll at least look at it. So for me, in everything that I do, I think that there's some merit to people just being good at that sort of thing when they build their brand and their following. I think like for a select few people, you can just bring that to the table. Like, hey, this guy's number one in the world at, like, I don't know, pick a game, right?
Right.
You're going to get a lot of people who are just there for that. But not all of us are going to be number one in the world. Like, some of us might not even be that great at what we do. So in reference to the idea of a brand, you yourself need to be entertaining in some regard. And it's hard, right? It's when you think of yourself, it's hard to objectively say, I think that I'm entertaining or I think that I'm not entertaining, because realistically, the only people who can, reasonably decide that is an audience. But when you factor in things that involve like you and how approachable or marketable or whatever angle you're going for, you have to go in with this idea that like you have to be the most important part of your content.
Right.
If you lack in some areas, find a way to make it up somewhere else. And as long as you keep your head on straight, as long as you do all the things correctly, you don't get lost in all the chaos that is the internet these days. I think you'll establish your identity, and once you have that identity, that thing you're known for, be it the niche, the personality, the skill, you'll have the following. It'll come naturally.
Gotcha. Where do you think you are on that journey so far? Like, obviously, it never really ends per se, but like, are you happy with how everything is going? Do you see any like potential hurdles in the road, or are you planning on any like changes right now with everything that you're doing?
I mean, so change is always constant. I like to think that if you're not evaluating yourself for change at all times, that you're probably doing something wrong.
Right.
That isn't to say that you should always be questioning yourself, but like if something seems like you could improve, or if there's like maybe a different angle, you should always be looking to evaluate that. As far as like for me, I don't see myself like having any drastic changes. Like I think like what I offer people right now anyway is a place that they can come hang out and speak to people who have similar interests, because it's not just me, it's also the community I have, and communities I'm a part of too. And that's important to like also remember, is if you intend to do this kind of thing, it's important to also be part of communities, not just establishing one, because you also have to remember what it's like to be people on the inside. A lot of my content and stuff, even for as early as this is, I would say almost infancy level, where I'm at right now. A big motivation to start what I've started stems from some things that I've been dealing with for the last 2 years. There's a lot of talk today in society about it, and I think the talk is good. Unfortunately, not everything that's being said is something that it comes from a place of understanding, or a place of even sometimes a place of empathy, which is a big talking point for this going forward too. But for me, mental health in general is part of the reason I've been making a lot of the decisions and moves that I have been, and like the people I'm associating with, the things that I'm following, because you're never truly appreciative of how your life can be radically changed at a moment's notice by something completely out of your control. And then you're just left picking up pieces of things to try and like put some semblance of something you're familiar with back together. You have to relearn when people get broken or upset about like smaller things, and people belittle them and stuff, and like this goes on like two different sides of the spectrum. I'll cover the other one for sure. You'll get a lot of people who have this mentality of just like, while other people have it worse than you, there's no reason you can ever complain because, like, some kid in Africa starved to death. And I'm like, not really relevant. And then you'll have like one side that'll be like, you can't say that anyone's experience is like something you can always relate to. Everyone's unique and they have their own thing. I've learned now through experience, because I used to be in like the middle, just like I was dealing with it, but like until I hit like a critical moment, I didn't really know where I wanted to fall. So now, to get to my point,
Mm-hmm.
there is a big reason I've picked up all this, and it's because 2 years ago or so, there was a bit of turmoil that had come up. Without going too much into detail to spare you guys an extremely long story, my family has a bit of a caustic relationship. I have 23 aunts and uncles. There's a
Wow.
lot. And not all of them get along. I'm sure once I say this, you guys will more or less get the picture. A good portion of my family are police officers. The other portion of my family tend to be arrested by police officers.
Oh, wow.
It's not an uncommon occurrence that, like, a cousin of mine will lock up another cousin of mine. Happens with alarming frequency.
Jeez.
So there's always been a bit of a divide, right? So where this becomes a huge problem for me is obviously with all the occurrences going on in the world. This is a big issue right now in this moment in time, but this has been going on for a long time, and I'm aware of it more because I'm related to police officers. There is a unique situation that I've been a part of years prior to this, and kind of give you the point of view. I had a uncle of mine. He had his 2-year-old son in his car. Just stopped at the bank, pulled over, had a tail light out. That was it. That was the only reason he got pulled over. So cop comes up to the door, asks him, "Hey, license and registration." For whatever reason, and I'm not entirely sure the details here, there was some kind of misunderstanding, and when Uncle went to go pull information out of his glove box, the officer assumed he was reaching for a weapon and killed him right there.
Wow.
In front of his child, in front of many bystanders. When I say years ago, I mean like quite a while ago. At the time, I was like too young to really comprehend it, like at the level that like we're facing these issues now. But one thing that's really easy to comprehend when you're young is like seeing loss in people. Like there were family members I were close to who were very close to this person, like immediate family, and he was, like I said, not the kind of person I spent a lot of time with myself, but you can see the pain in other people. So for a long time, my opinion on things was shaped by having so many police officers in your family. But then you also have that experience where somebody who's innocent gets taken by police misconduct. And I think for me, on like the issue that's going on in the world, that's like caused this ball for me to get rolling. I have like a unique perspective to have been on both sides. Where this goes and why this is a problem is we spend a lot of time on the internet, and obviously as people who do social media, create content, you're going to get pulled into these things.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time, my family would be on opposite ends of this stuff, and it gets real close to home when you're talking about like people who are like literally related to you going back and forth over people who are literally related to you.
Right.
Without like trying to expose too much of the family details and stuff, there's I don't know how much you may have seen this occasionally on my Facebook page, because it gets put out there. It's uncomfortably public for me, and that's a big problem. But I'm not quiet on my opinions of things.
Right.
Not to steal Pete's thunder or anything, considering the political spectrum of this. I'm talking like the human side of it. For me, it's less about politics, more about basic human decency, and I try to keep things away from that as much as possible. But like, people are going to drag you into it. People are going to want your opinion. People are going to demand some kind of stance. And the smart thing for us to do always just stay out of it. But when you have so many personal ties to it, it gets increasingly harder and harder.
Yep.
So I was in like a really bad place. I decided one day, hey, I don't want to be in the middle of this. I'm gonna just sporadically change my life. I did this pretty quietly. Ty, I'm sure you remember.
Yeah.
He was kind of along for the ride for a good portion of it. I came up with this idea. Right, I'm gonna take the list of just everything that I'm like afraid of, all of it, everything that is like on a 3 out of 10 on the fear scale and up. Just put it on the list. We're gonna knock it out. So I went and did a few things. Got over my like fear of reptiles and snakes pretty quickly. Didn't quite get the progress I would have liked to on like darkness, but like for the mental health portion of this, obviously that's I don't want to talk too much on that because it's important later. But I arrived at needles, right? And that's an obscure one, right?
Yeah.
So fear of needles, obviously I didn't like getting shots or whatever, but like how do you get over any fear, right? It's to expose yourself to that fear. Well, there's not very many safe environments you can expose yourself to needles. So we brainstormed a little bit, and then Ty came up to me. He's like, hey, you know what? You could donate plasma, right? And like, hear me out. They'll actually pay you for your time and your service. You get to help people, and needles, all the needles you could want. I'm like, yeah, hey, 3 birds with 1 stone. This is a slam dunk. This is the best idea ever. The first 2 donations go great without a hitch, perfectly fine. The third donation is where things took a pretty bad turn for me, and I learned a whole lot. And this is the key point. Say now, bring it up later. You do not understand something as well as you think you do until you're there. And I've always had anxiety disorder, been diagnosed with that forever. I've always had like ADHD issues, and that's all like stuff that a lot of people deal with, right? And you think like you get the diagnosis, and all of a sudden like it's your life and you're used to it. Everything in life is a spectrum, all of it. And you could have it and be a 2, and then like people who are 2s think that they're like 30s. It's just it's crazy. So we end up going in. It's the same process as usual. We sit down. They give you the alcohol cleaning. You run a screening. They check your blood for like contaminants. If you have any drastic weight change, like this is pretty intense stuff. Like they don't like nothing. They don't let nothing go. If you have a bruise, you're out of there.
Jeez.
So I go in, sit down, get hooked up to the machine, and this is entirely, pretty much entirely my fault. Like 5% mechanical failure on their part, 95% my fault. So I'm doing well. I'm thinking like, yeah, I'm going to be over this needle thing and no problem. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to just sit here shooting the shit with Ty and like.
How long does it take?
Well, it varies a little bit. So they enjoyed having me down there because they said I was a good bleeder. So for me, it took about 45 minutes to donate the amount of plasma they wanted. Ty, however, has veins that are apparently full of nothing but like syrup. So for him, it took like an hour and 15 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
And he.
It's just like with a needle stuck in your arm.
Yeah.
Oh jeez.
Okay. And you learn, especially like. Take it from me if you ever decide to do this, because it's good money. Don't get me wrong, like $300 extra a month for like 4 hours of your time.
Really?
4 hours of your time. Yeah.
Wow.
But so I go in, I get take, and then I'm just way too relaxed. And that's the problem. Like I got my leg hanging off the side of the chair. I'm like talking. I'm like have my exaggerated body posture that I always have, and I can't sit still for shit. So like when you're terrified, it's real easy to be still. But whenever you're like comfortable. And I kick my leg or rock my chair. I do not remember the last time that I've owned a single chair that I haven't broken leaning on it the wrong way. But all of a sudden I started to like feel a little woozy, and I'm like, oh well, it's a common side effect of this. No big deal. And like I'm sitting there talking to Ty, and then like his expression gradually goes from like enjoying a conversation to like concern. He's like, yeah. You're talking really funny. Like all of your words are slurred and you're making less sense.
Jeez.
And like in my own head, I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm fine. And then like he said that, and I took a second to like self-evaluate. I'm like, oh no, I don't feel good.
Oh my.
So I'm like trying to like call for help, cannot call for help. No one can understand what I'm saying.
Jesus.
So like the best I could do is I'm just like tapping time, just like pointing at a nurse. It's all I could like figure out. So they come over. It ends up being like, hey, your body posture's awful. You're restricting blood flow to your brain. That's why you're getting muscle spasms. That's why you can't talk. It's all this stuff that's happening is 100% because you just need to like relax, drink this Powerade. You'll be fine. They put the blood back in me, and then I had to redo the donation. I walked out of there fine, right? Everything's fine. So I kind of go through life for a little bit. It's about a week later. And I'm just sitting at home. I'm drinking my iced tea, and everyone knows. Like, if you know me, I kill Turner's iced tea. Like, I have caffeine in my system at all times. And I'm sitting there, and I got, like, just, typically from caffeine, you'll get this. Like, you'll get, like, an occasional twitch. Like, a muscle will just kind of go. And it happened in my face, which is like where like the muscle spasms were happening whenever I was like, basically being bled to death.
Jeez.
And they immediately, like my thoughts were like, that feels familiar. And then I cannot describe the feeling, but it felt like my heart just dropped. Like I've only ever been that terrified in my entire life, and that was the one time I've ever gotten on a roller coaster, right? And like I just sat there, like my heart just like thud and then just stopped, and then like thud stopped, and I like the palpitations were like bordering on painful, and I'm like, what is going on? What's like wrong with me? I have no idea. So I go to the ER. They run a slew of tests, nothing, can't find anything. So I'm terrified. I have no idea what's going on. Couple of days pass, happens again, and I'm just like, what is it? I'm talking debilitating, like hyperventilating, can't control. Half of my body's just muscle spasms, and like nothing feels right. Like what I've come to learn is the term is disassociating. Is like it almost felt like I was in this like alternate reality. Like nothing was real, nothing was tangible. So I go to the hospital, nothing. This happens 2 more times. I end up back in the hospital the 4th time, and the doctor's just like, look, you're not even on insurance. You're blowing a whole lot of money being here. We're going to run the tests again. They're going to come back negative. We're thinking whatever's happening to you is going on in your head. And I'm just like thinking like, no, there's no way. These symptoms are like physical. Like I feel this.
How long ago was this again?
It'll actually be like a year that like the worst of it. Today is the 16th. It'll be a year tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
The worst of it. So I just like, I don't want to say dismissed it, but at the time I was just like, I know people could have stuff in their head. Like I have anxiety and all this stuff. Like, this isn't new information to me or whatever, but like, this is different. Mm-hmm. This is really different. So it happened for a few more times for a while. And eventually I ran out of answers on my end, and just like, well, this is what the doctor said, I'm going to go with it. I ran into a YouTube channel. Guy goes by the name Trey Jones. He talks a lot about anxiety and how like crippling it can be, and steps to recovery, which is the important part. That's why I looked him up. And like, sure enough, every single thing I was dealing with, like to a T, was something that he was dealing with. So yeah, it was anxiety. It was anxiety the whole time. And the one of the terrifying things you learn about anxiety once you get set on the path to like actually learn about it is, because it's all mental, it can copy any symptom from any disease and make you feel like you're feeling that. So you'll go through a list of things. You'll think like, oh, my heart's beating out of rhythm and like really poorly, and like I'm having trouble with blood flow. I must have heart disease. You don't. It's just mentally your mind is that powerful. It can make you have heart palpitations if you think hard enough on it. Yeah. And like where this becomes problematic is because a lot of people like I don't say this as an insult, but like surface level thinking is what we do 90% of the time. It's just like our conscious thoughts. Our subconscious, however, has way more say and way more control than we think we do. So when I went through that event, like getting the blood drawn, and that happened, and that like sense of panic, that fear, that terror I felt, your brain implants that as like you surviving something horrible, even though in reality we know that it wasn't necessarily as big of a deal as it felt. In your mind, it's like filed under like, all right, anytime you get these sensations, you're under attack. So kicks in the fight and flight, which is all anxiety and panic disorder is. It's your body preemptively and without reasoning kicking on your fight or flight responses because subconsciously you experience something that relates back to a past trauma. And I learned very quickly that like trauma is not understood the way it needs to be understood, because anyone looking at that situation is going to say, well, it wasn't that big of a deal, you weren't in any actual danger. Unfortunately, at a subconscious level, our bodies don't recognize that. It will get stored as a life or death situation, and anytime you experience something similar, that will happen. It will click on, and suddenly it's just like being stranded in the middle of the ocean. It's like being hunted down by like a mountain lion. You can't escape the paranoia, you can't escape the fear until like your body has decided you have either fought the invader or have escaped successfully. That's normally pretty easy. I've come to find out that like if I go for a run, like immediately after a panic attack, symptoms go away super quick. But for people who work in like office cubicles where it happens at the job, for people who are maybe predisposed to certain things that don't give them the opportunity, because like we all have our lives, we don't have an ability to just go for a run at the drop of a hat all the time. That panic will sit there and fester until you've done something. And it wasn't until I've gone through it like so many times that I realized that this is really crippling. This will stop you dead in your tracks. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter in your head. Like you're like, I'm fine. I don't know what's wrong with me, but like there should be nothing. Like I'm healthy. I'm young. I'm like fully, I might be a little fat, but like there's nothing wrong with like, just having a couple extra pounds, right? Like I'm not going to die from that.
Right.
But the symptoms are so strong and so exaggerated too that like you genuinely start to believe that your body's failing you. And like I said, it wasn't until I've consulted multiple health professionals, which is the mistake. Prefacing this before I go forward, when you see a doctor, it's okay to maybe want one second opinion, but they know a lot more about this than you do. And don't make the dumb mistake I did. Don't sit there and go to like 6 different doctors because you think that they're wrong. They're probably not. And for those of you who may be dealing with panic disorder and anxiety, trust me on this. If that's what they're telling you, that's what this is, explore that first. If they're wrong, it'll show up almost immediately. But if they're right, you'll be a lot better off almost immediately. So, because what I'm about to say is the direct definition of what you should never do in my position. I went to countless doctors. I went to ERs, different hospitals. I couldn't accept the answer that was given to me because of how it felt. It just didn't make sense. Like it was all in your head. Like it, there's no way. Like it couldn't process. So I eventually went to a therapist and learned a little bit more about my situation. They recommended me to a psychiatrist. Learned a little bit more. And the rabbit hole for this particular disorder goes deep, depending on your like level of severity. I found out that I have a unique form of anxiety. It's terrifying when you're a little kid, but like I have a grasp of it, right? I always wonder if like people who are a little worse off in my position, that's probably how they end up being like insane, is like the people who are just like slightly more chemically imbalanced. But after going to the psychiatrist and talking to him, pulled up some old records and stuff. Like I went untreated for quite a few things for most of my life, mostly by choice. I prefer to beat it naturally if I can, and if medicine's like absolutely necessary, then sure. I don't hate modern medicine,
Right.
but remembering that medicine itself is like using a poison to counteract another poison. Like it's an art and it's great, but like if you don't need it, you are poisoning yourself. Right. So one of the interesting things that I've learned, and I don't talk about this publicly because the stigma related to it, but I can explain it now better than I ever have. So I'm using this as an opportunity to educate people. possibly for your own personal progress, like getting out of a bad spot. One of the symptoms of my anxiety is hallucinations. And when I was a kid, they were much more vivid. As an adult, I don't get them nearly as much. I have like a pretty firm grasp on it. When I'm not feeling anxiety, the symptoms don't exist. They just don't. I'm fine. But when you feel anxiety, especially at an intense level, it triggers this phenomenon in your brain. So, don't feel like you're going crazy, because this is the explanation. You get sent into your fight and flight. And then for me, it's like easiest happens like in the dark at nighttime. So to give you the perfect example, like I'll be laying down to go to bed. If everything's off and I have no light in my room, just imagine like pitch black or close to it. That's always terrified me. It puts me on edge. I'm not comfortable, so the anxiety creeps in. So for the natural transition into fight or flight, your brain has to justify a threat. It has to understand an enemy. It has to find a way to like, okay, this happened, but why? But when there is no threat and you can't really perceive anything as a threat, your brain tries its hardest to fill in the blank. So for me, because of my personal fears and stuff, when I'm in the dark, I'll hear like, because doll movies scare the shit out of me, right? I hate Annabelle. I'll hear like a little girl giggling in the corner of my room, or I'll hear like some voice whispering my name from like across the room. It's a hallucination. It's not happening, but my brain has decided that I am not safe here, and I must address whatever theoretical threat is out there, even if there isn't any. It goes as far as like in times of like high anxiety, you have visual hallucinations, and that's terrifying when you're a kid. But once you have an understanding that it's not real, you'll find that like your symptoms like slowly start going away. Once you've like grasped the idea that like, hey, this is just my brain trying to do its best to protect me, and the only way it knows how, like through years and years of evolutionary instinct that just doesn't quite translate to the modern world. We're not like quite there. That's what causes this, and it can happen to you. It can happen to anybody you know, and like trauma can happen in so many seemingly mundane scenarios. You could consciously lock it in the back of your mind, not ever think twice about it, and then maybe a couple years down the line, for me it was only like a week, but like say a couple years down the line, you get exposed to some kind of stimuli that like causes that chain reaction that like flashes your subconscious flashes back to this moment where it's decided it's recorded a trauma. You'll go into fight or flight mode. It will cause all these symptoms, and the reason why it gets worse is because when you don't know what's wrong with you, when you can't find a reasonable explanation for why you feel this way, your brain will just start filling in the blank. It will decide that like, all right, your heart pace is wrong, heart disease, you have heart disease. And then your brain, like you make it real. You decide that this is heart disease, and then you start getting symptoms of heart disease. And if you let your mind run away with it, it gets worse and worse. You have to learn first to consciously ground yourself, and then bring yourself back to the reality that like you don't know that, and then slowly work your way back to a place of like, there are many explanations for what could be wrong. There are plenty of people who can help me. You just have to learn to trust them. That was my mistake. And take their expertise as like reasonable, even if it sounds off. So I guess because I spoke for quite a while now to kind of surmise the entire scenario. For me, the issue came from just being predisposed to stressful environments. If you allow yourself to be in an area, like I said, amongst my family, where there's lots of like feuding and not very friendly behavior, even amongst ourselves, you become susceptible to things like anxiety disorder and panic disorder when even seemingly mundane things happen to you could be recorded as like trauma in your subconscious. Soldiers that go to war have like an obvious and extreme example of this, like PTSD for like being in actual life or death situations. This is like the precursor for it. We don't have enough respect in today's society for the kinds of things that can cause this. And I think because we understand like life or death scenarios at like in like a broader sense now, like we have a scope of life or death, that just part of being a conscious human being. We tend to dismiss things that we can logically decide are not threats. But that does not mean that your instinctual level, your subconscious, is there yet. So when people have these mental illnesses and people don't understand where they come from, people don't understand like, oh well, you're a rich millionaire who is really popular and you have all these nice things. You know, how could you possibly be dealing with this sort of thing? Is you don't know, and to some degree, they may not even know why they feel the way they do. And without like therapy and self introspection, like for me, it was easy. I don't take that for granted. I was able to fortunately experience all this and have the understanding while also being able to get out of the worst of it pretty quickly because it was a direct line. Like, had traumatic event, had bad, unhealthy environment, here's your path to solutions. For people who have it locked away for years and genuinely don't, like on the surface, remember these things, the path to recovery is a lot harder and a lot more difficult to understand for somebody who may have never gone through any kind of trauma.
Wow. Well, I appreciate you sharing that story with us, Dave, and I'm sure we got kind of more to cover there. Can we try to unpack a little bit of it now, you think?
Yeah, if there's any particular part of that you were curious about.
Yeah, I mean, that's a wild ride. I mean, just, obviously for me and, maybe some of our viewers that haven't had haven't gone through something like that. How, like, do you think it comes about just from an environment, or is it definitely something that's, I know nothing. So is the source of that, can it be environmental? Can it be like learned in a sense, or can it be just almost like something that you're kind of born with in a sense, or like
So every single human being could be born in the unfortunate circumstance of being chemically imbalanced, and that's hard to immediately identify. I can't speak too much to those people because despite having a recognized chemical imbalance, it changes in severity. It's not like something that like you can just like immediately put on a graph. So for people who are born in that position, yes, they can be, but we don't have a great understanding scientifically of how severe that can be or how much it plays a role. Because I mean, people who are born like super off, like that's obvious. But like
right.
for somebody who more or less seems to function well but might be a little quirky, like where do you draw the line between imbalanced and possibly mentally ill and then someone who's just maybe a little strange?
Right.
But for the subject of the environment, if this makes sense, the best metaphor I could always give the people, it's tilling the land and fertilizing the soil, but it's not planting the seed. So you give a prime opportunity when you are in a bad environment and in a bad situation for when a seed that gets planted to become a much more monstrous problem. So some of us can come from bad scenarios and just be fortunate enough to never get to a point where your mind decides that you've had like a significant trauma. Those people could then leave said bad environment and be totally normal, probably live a happy, successful life. Unfortunately, for those who come from bad environments and do tend to suffer that trauma, it's exponentially worse for them than it is for somebody who's like had a pretty comfortable life and has like a good support base around them, has more or less all their needs taken care of, and you don't become prone to things that are possibly harmful to you because in a lot of ways it's already taken care of for you, like kind of a theoretically homogenized scenario for anyone's life. For me, in my particular situation, when it's your family, you can't really escape it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when and like I said, I'm fortunate that like not worse things have happened, because I can't, if genuinely like terrible events had occurred earlier in my life, I can't imagine where I'd be. And that's why I mean, when it comes with empathy for others, because you never know. Um, for me, it was definitely like constantly being on edge, constantly being stressed, leads to being, um, it almost like after a while that becomes the environment itself. It's not so much like you can just leave. Your like say like even if I had infinite money, you could move out, go to wherever I wanted to. But because I've been stewing in it so long, I kind of drag it with me wherever I go. Um, and it takes a conscious effort to not be that way. Like I said, a younger, angrier, more jaded version of myself, like the kind of person I was in high school, I was content to just drag that with me everywhere. I didn't care. Like, I was in a bad mood, and people were gonna know it, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not a good way to live life. You shouldn't do that. I mean, everyone goes through their angsty teenage phase,
Right.
but when you're an adult, you know, and I hate to say it this way, but the bag gets heavier as the years go on. For you to escape the environment, you need to start escaping certain routines in yourself, certain habits and behaviors of yourself that you like you don't inherently recognize as being terrible, but because they relate to something that was terrible, uh, it becomes part of the motions. You're going through so many things that strike at your subconscious that you're never consciously aware of. So you need to process it, understand it, and then deal with it, and specifically in that order. And where the hitch for a lot of people is the processing part, because, like I said, we're intelligent as a species almost to a fault. Like, our advancement has not caught up with our evolution, or
Mm-hmm.
rather the other way around. The evolution hasn't caught up with our advancement, and there's still so many things about us that are like instinctual and like, you know, normal to the, you know, says like, you know, we're animals to an extent. And it's interesting because I've learned so much about the mind through this experience. It's just important to remember that you can't ever uh, let yourself feel that something's inescapable, and that's I guess like the important takeaway is you can leave an environment, but you can take all the baggage with you. You can drop the baggage, but you can still carry like the like a bit of soreness or like a bit of resentment from it. What you really need to do more than anything is to understand why you feel the way you do. And like I said, that's the common disconnect. That's where in society you get a lot of the people who maybe don't respect mental illness in the way that it should. It's because they just don't have the connection to it.
Hmm. So, do you think, and like obviously you dealt with this personally, and then I'm sure you did a lot of like research, and that coupled with the experience has gotten you to this place now where you know a lot about it. It seems like you have maybe not fully rectified it. I'm not sure where along the line you can do that, like to what extent. I'm not sure if it can go away completely, like, or you can totally get back to or get to a place that you don't have to experience any of that. But like you said, I think it's gotten better, at least, right?
Yeah. So it's good that you touched on that, because this is the progress part of this
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
conversation. So you will get better, guaranteed, as long as you do all the right things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one thing that you never want to give a guarantee in life ever. I feel confident enough to say something like this. Um, Barring some like astronomically terrible situation, like something unfathomably unspeakable that I wouldn't even feel comfortable discussing it on the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
the average person will be able to beat panic and anxiety disorder if they take the appropriate steps. Sometimes those steps require extended removal from society for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So not to say that it'll be easy, but how I started getting better is you need to completely change your routine first. That's always the hardest part. That's hard for a normal person, right? Like, think about like all the things you do throughout the day, like the things that you've just gone accustomed to, for so many years of your life or whatever, and you just have to stop, right? Like, routines make us comfortable. Routines give us an objective, like a checklist to work through. You can kind of see how your day's going through a routine. So when you remove your old routine and then replace it with a new one, you think, well, what am I doing now? What you need to do every single day, without fail, and consistently, consciously keep this in mind, you need to ask yourself, where are my unhealthy habits and how can I cut them out entirely? And when I say the scope of anxiety extends like far broader than people understand, I mean like to levels that like I would have never expected prior to being here. For me, what I had to do is I had to wake up every single day, and there's many different ways you can do this, but like this is the one I chose. Positive affirmation meditation. You have to remind yourself that not everything's terrible, and like you would have like a list of things that you would say to yourself along the lines of like you are safe, you're valuable, everything is okay, you're gonna get through this day, everything will be fine, bad things come and go, it'll pass. Like, you have to start thinking like that all the time, because when you do, you start slowly eroding that block in your subconscious. Because if you sit here and just say, oh, well, it wasn't a big deal, and it's still in your subconscious, you're still not actively doing anything about it. You've just dismissed it. But like a lot of things in life, you can't just be like, oh, well, it doesn't matter, and then leave it there, because it'll fester. So even small things like just positive thinking, positive reinforcement, begin to erode that subconscious block. Now, there are certain things you're going to need to do for your specific issue. Like I said, exposure therapy works, actually. It's actually the most effective thing that you can do for trauma. If you were attacked by a dog as a child or something, the best thing you could do is probably go to a dog park. Mostly because you will then subconsciously be able to recognize that these are not always a threat. This was like an isolated incident. This isn't something that's going to happen to you all the time. The second thing that you have to do, which this will be really interesting, I think, for your, especially for your audience, your diet. Actually, I had to cut caffeine. I had to cut caffeine entirely. As somebody who never spent a single moment without it, as somebody who in high school found unconventional ways to get his hands on caffeine pills to put in things, that was not easy. I had been so wired to caffeine for about like a decade and a half to this point that the idea of cutting it was just unthinkable. Caffeine had to go. Trans fat had to go. Sugar had to go. And the big one, this really upset me, but ultimately it's true. You need to get rid of red sauces and carbs.
Wow. Shit.
Yeah, so pretty much half of my life is spent eating pizza and spaghetti.
Yeah.
So I was just like, fuck, man, that's like everything I like in life has to go. The thing of it is it can be a temporary change. It's not something that needs to go permanently, but while you're recovering, it has to go. And the reason why is because obviously you're a chemical soup. You exist purely because of endless biological functions. What you put in your body does ultimately affect how your body functions. You get certain minerals and stuff from certain foods that make you feel certain ways. You get certain acids, certain oils and stuff, and they all serve a purpose. They all burn differently. Your body is fantastic at making use of the useless. And unfortunately, we, as a society, especially in America, we put a lot of useless in our diet. The problem is that it doesn't burn efficiently. You'll find terrible things like embarrassing symptom when you eat like garbage for so long and then you suddenly stop. You get pretty light IBS. Your that whole digestive tract just in a very simple way to describe it just goes, what? Doesn't know how to process. Like I went from, like I said, eating nothing but pizza and carbs, and then I went to eating salads, and I don't think I digested a single thing that went in my body for about 3 days.
Jeez.
So it once you start eating better and you start like putting the things that your body actually needs, you will feel better. And then subconsciously, how that acts and affects on your anxiety is when you feel better, your body no longer has this idea that it needs to justify a threat. Like even if you have a migraine, your body wants to attack it. It wants to remove the problematic thing. And we all know that migraines aren't like a lion. Migraines aren't like some dude in a dark alley trying to mug you. But like consciously you're aware that it's a problem. And then subconsciously problems have to be addressed. And that's the line. Um, we're at the point now where we understand the process, but like for an individual, it will be different for everybody. Your process will vary. I'm giving you the very basic things that like everyone should do. These are the things that were like at worst, absolute worst for you will be net neutrals, right? But there are other therapies that work, and then for some people they very don't work. They just make the situation worse. The important thing is to remember that there will never be a point in your life where if you're dieting, you'll be like, sure am worse off for this. Sure wish I didn't start losing all this weight and, having this absolutely phenomenal, like, waking up and having energy thing. I don't understand. Like, where did I go wrong? You'll never regret these choices. So, I mean, you'll miss cake. Like, you'll miss all the dumb, ridiculous snacks you used to eat before. Trust me, the cravings were there months afterwards. The cravings were there, but like you'll find that like they lessen over time because, like I said, you're a creature of habit. Once you have established norms, your body wants to preserve those norms, and sometimes anxiety is your norm. You need to do all of the detail work. You can't just dismiss things. You can't just pretend that I can cheat today because like I've been so good lately. Not a thing. Not how that works. You have to stick to it. And for me, one of the easiest things for me to kick, it was not a problem, but people in my group who suffer from the same sorts of things say it was super hard, was alcohol. For me, I could buy a bottle of rum and it could sit on my cabinet for 6 months. I can never touch it. I'll be fine. I have people who are like, bordering on alcoholism, or people who even just drink socially a lot. Like that was really hard for them. And you're going to have a different challenge every single time. Like, feel the need to reiterate that because you never want to paint anything with a broad brush. But you also need to remember in like a moment, right, that like any weird stimuli can trigger that anxiety and then immediately cause the panic to set back in. So when you cheat, right, you run the risk of completely, totally reversing some of the effects that you were hoping to get. Then you got to start over again. It's not impossible, right? Like everyone could have potential relapses. But if you're constantly needing to start from square one, I think like we can all generally agree, like not a favorable scenario. It's demanding. It's tough. Nothing about anxiety or panic disorder is I would ever describe as simple. You'll find it extends to so many other portions of your life too. You find yourself appreciating smaller details in anything. You find yourself on the good end of it, right? Let's talk about like where you want to be, not where you could be, right? So on the possible good end of the spectrum, because of all the changes you make, you'll end up in my opinion, you'll end up in a much better place than you were than when you first started experiencing these symptoms to begin with, because of the amount of dedication and like determination, discipline that you're more or less forced to have under these conditions. So with a long-winded explanation out of the way, I can promise you that as long as it's not some like horrible, unspeakable evil, you can and will get better with the right amount of discipline, determination, and I guess stick-to-itiveness that comes with it. As long as you do that, you'll get to the end of the tunnel. Like, it's not just a far off light, you'll be there. So
That's good info, man. I mean, couple questions that kind of come to mind. And like you mentioned caffeine, you mentioned alcohol, you mentioned dieting and all that sort of stuff. And I think that, I don't know. I mean, I was trying to do some introspection as I processed everything that you were saying there, and I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think if any of that is a factor in my life now, and I think that one of the things is like, how do you know? I mean, obviously the symptoms that you described were pretty evident, right? Like, you like hallucinations and things like that, where it's like, and it started to really affect you. And I've had this happen to me multiple times. Well, not the symptoms, but I've had multiple things, like influence me and make me realize that the mind is much more powerful than I think people understand. That if I understood correctly, it can have like some terrible effects on you if you don't know. Is part of the message that you've received and that you want to continue to, to our viewers here and everything like that, to like, pay it forward? Is it that you just need to be able to try to control it as much as you can, like when you have those type of instances and stuff? Or
So it comes down to semantics, right? I'll explain it like this. I don't think that you're wrong to say that.
yeah.
But the word control is a very strong point of contention in the the communities I've been in.
Right.
You never want to control this, and that's the important thing. You need to let go. You have to understand that it has control of you until you like release this attachment you have to it. Like I said, on the subconscious level, it's very hard to control because it's like it kind of gets burned into you at that point. You kind of have to slowly work it out of your system. When people get the idea of control, right? They think, say you have a panic attack, they want to stop their symptoms. They do a whole bunch of things to like try and get control of the situation. When you try to take the wheel, you actually give it that power over you. And that's the important thing to remember. You need to, in the best way that you could control the situation, which I think this is what you would actually want the message to be. And like I said, important to specify this because a lot of people they don't get this concept right away, and it does delay their recovery. You need to just tell yourself, like, hey, this is here. This is happening. I do not control this. That's fine. It'll pass. It always does. I'll be okay at the end of this. There's nothing wrong with me. Just kind of breathe in, breathe out, let it go. Mm-hmm. If you do that, gradually the symptoms will start to subside because it's so in our nature as species, people, society, whatever. We want to have as much control over the things that affect us as possible. One of the things that I've always been known for is I like to have control of my situations as well. Sometimes, like when I was younger, even overstepping pretty obvious boundaries. So that's like innate to me. That is something natively Dave for a lot of people. I had to learn very quickly that you do not control this. You do not have any power over this because that's the wrong mentality. You don't want to have power over the situation. What you need to learn to do is to just let it go. Like, you're never going to conquer every demon. You're never going to win every battle. But sometimes the correct thing to do is remember you're not in a battle. Mm-hmm. You're just having a bit of a personal struggle. And there's no victory to be fought here in that sense. So if the word control gets used, the correct way to look at it is you just don't want to let it have control over you. And that's the best mentality to have on the road to recovery.
Interesting. Almost like more of, I like the let it go type of thing. I kind of got the perspective from the example you laid out there. Like, you're accepting that it's like the current circumstance that's happening to you, and then with that you just become like more understanding of the situation, and then it kind of goes by the wayside because ultimately it's you that's creating those types of scenarios. So subconscious, yeah, that's wild. It's a wild thing.
Yeah, it serves a purpose. Like it's
Right.
kept us alive as a species for how long?
Right.
The problem is that it's meant to give knee-jerk reactions and immediately defensive responses to things to keep us safe. And unfortunately, that does not always serve us.
Right.
You need to remember your subconscious wants to punch things or run away from things that want to punch us, and not every situation involves punching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of a silly metaphor, but you know.
Right. No, that's wild, man. I mean, how do you? I mean, because again, I'm thinking about it from my own perspective, and I haven't experienced any of that, but I assume that there's people all over the spectrum in a sense, right? Like, people that deal with it very heavily, and then people that deal with it very minimally. And I would say that probably from my personal experience, I've probably started to deal with it more. I was probably dealing with it when I was working because I just didn't like what I was doing every day, and I think that starts to weigh on you. I don't know exactly how much. I mean, I guess we talked about environment, so I think that probably has something to do with it. But then, like, even now, like, I'm doing things that I love to do, but occasionally, though, I just want to, I have this mentality. I mean, you watch the live streams and, I'm doing all this stuff. Like, it's like I want to continue to go, go, go. And I don't know if that's actually the right way to feel. I think it's probably caused me a little bit of some sort of anxiety. Like, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know how to, really, like just like that. Like, I don't know how to put it into words per se, other than the fact that I'm always thinking about how can I continue to improve. And I think that that's good to a certain extent, but I do think it can kind of lead to some, just anxious thoughts. And I haven't had like any like hallucinations. I can't think of stuff that I'm specifically afraid of. So I don't know if that's the realm that I'm in. But I mean, have you talked to or been in communities with people that are like more mild in a sense, like have that in more mild of a sense, or like almost created that from anything that sounded similar to what I just described?
Yeah, so this is the easy part of the discussion. I feel like we all get on the same page here. Anxiety is not like an exclusive emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Every human being on the planet experiences it at some point,
Mm-hmm.
to varying degrees. So it is. I would say everything in life is a spectrum for all intents and purposes for a conversation. Nothing will ever be so simple as to just be on like a flat line ever. And like I can get into like the weeds about my opinions on like what a spectrum actually is, because I
Mm-hmm.
think even people who mean well don't do it justice.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, so everyone experiences anxiety. There are people who will have mild symptoms. It will come for everybody. Uh, what I have is the disorder, which is when anxiety has become more than just a passing emotion, right? So your brain wants to chemically tell you when you're in favorable situations, unfavorable situations, and that's all going to be based on like what you've like consciously put into your mind and have like done over and over. So like for you in your job, right?
Right.
For you to have anxiety over being there, it's honestly not. I would imagine more people than not deal with that kind of thing, and
Mm-hmm.
it's legitimate. It's you don't want to be there, and sometimes when you don't have a choice in the matter, or like feel that you're kind of going through the motions, or whatever life is handing you, I guess at the time, it's important to remember that like uh, to a degree we feel like we should be in a little bit more control of our own destiny, and it's not always reality for us. The other thing that you mentioned on is actually a big talking point in the community. It is horrible for your if you have an anxiety disorder to have also been a perfectionist to some degree,
Oh yeah.
and we've talked about that even a little bit before the stream, just setting things
Yeah.
up. The worst thing you can do to yourself is look at something that's 99% good and decide because it's 1% off that you must then improve it.
Yeah.
There is nothing wrong with wanting to try and improve something, but when you make it like the goal, the objective, now you're falling short of a standard, and that process is different mentally. Our brain puts that in a different category. That's not just like a, oh well, it's not exactly what I was hoping for, but it's pretty damn close, right? Like when you walk into it with that kind of mentality, chances are that like small amount isn't even noticeable to people, except the occasional asshole, right?
Right.
But like by and large, it'll function. It'll do everything you need it to do to a great degree in most cases, and like that's it. That's all. That's all the reality of the situation is. But like when we look at small imperfections, right? We have this drive to be the best at what we do, or to be at our best at what we do. And when we experience success to any degree, right? Like you see yourself like making progress. It's important to remember that humans need sleep 8 hours a day. Like
Yeah.
we can't keep doing what we do at a healthy level without sleep. The universe and the planet and all this, that works in a very similar fashion. Your progress can have diminishing returns based on your effort, and you will eventually arrive at a point where the effort is no longer worth the very minuscule amount of progress on whatever thing you might be working on. That would probably be the time to pivot to something else that also matters to you a whole lot. You can talk about like personal goals and objectives or stuff, but like you will always and forever run into a point where your progress will be stagnated sheerly by circumstance of life. And that's not that you are personally failing. That's the natural evolutions of things. Like put it away for a little, or not put it away. Understand where your place is right now, and keep doing that thing. Right, like, Fueled by Progress podcast. Like I feel is the biggest message of your channel is to always improve. Remember where your effort is best spent, though. You don't have to only improve at one thing in your life. You can improve in many areas of your life. And if you feel like you're not getting out what you're putting in, that's the time to maybe focus up on something else. Possibly, and this is the side benefit of it too, you could possibly get a new perspective that changes your ability to progress otherwise. But it's also important to remember, like, worst case scenario, you got nothing really going for you, or it feels like you've like stalled out. Go work on something else, because there's no single facet of you at any given point that doesn't need work done. And you serve yourself so much better to just kind of, once again, let it go. It's not going as quickly as you wanted to. It's fine. You can always come back to it.
Yeah. No, that's right up my alley, man. I definitely, and we, like you said, we've discussed it before about like perfectionism and making sure that, you want it to be as good as possible. I think, again, some introspection for me is I think that I've made some strides there, like I would hope, everybody else has. And I think some things that have helped me is just, again, to realize that, each video, each little thing, is because that's the realm that I operate in, doesn't need to be 100% perfect. I think just kind of getting it out there and, consistently improving, that is what I've started to change. Like, I mean, like with the setup and everything that I have going on, I want to try to make everything as good as possible so I can be as efficient as possible. I do enjoy doing that, but I think it definitely does come at the cost sometimes of a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of anxious thoughts, whatever you want to kind of talk about. And it does start to weigh on you. I mean, I always try to do the essentials, right? Try to have decent diet, exercise. I always get enough sleep. I'm not one of those crazy people that can grind 24/7. I know I'm up late, but I always get the amount of sleep, so it's wild. But yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting perspective, and I think that perfectionism and always trying to improve can plague a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, as far as the messaging of Fueled by Progress, I still think that you want to continue to get better, but like you said, on a broader scale, wherever you can, right? Because I think that I do think that if you're not moving forward, then you can potentially,
Find yourself falling backward.
In a little bit. I mean, like, I don't think that's always reigns true, but that's just kind of how I like to live my life. But it's always a balance. I mean, you can't. I put a lot of pressure on myself because I think that I just need to keep moving forward, and it definitely is detrimental at times. But I also don't want to. I don't know if I'd ever let myself get to that point though. So I think it's probably like a let it go type of thing to a certain degree. I don't know.
It's also important to remember that negative emotions exist for a reason. A lot of misconceptions surrounding like positivity and stuff, which is good for progress and things like that, is that you need to always cast aside your negative emotions, and that's actually incorrect. I know that it's not necessarily a popular opinion because we all have like the negative Nancy's in our life, and I'll admit I easily was one of them for most of my life. But the reality of it is we feel them for a reason. It's our mind and body trying to tell us something. Now, obviously, the anxiety disorder and panic are extremes at that end. But yes, everyone deals with anxiety, and that exists for the purposes of letting you know maybe your time is better spent elsewhere. And that's what I think is when I think of progress and, like you said, the broader scope. You need to be able to just take the hint that like nature and life is giving you, like, hey, if you're starting to get worked up over this, it doesn't mean abandon it entirely, but like maybe your energy and the feelings of progress would come in other facets if you approach them, if you had an open mind to the way that you feel. And like I said, it's a little bit dangerous too because, like I said, nobody wants to feel anxious. Nobody wants to feel bad ever if you can help it. But like, I think like we have this like people too frequently equate like positive and negative to like good and bad, or even to some scales like righteous or evil or things like that. You can take it to comical levels for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but like you we need to remember that like all things in life exist, like all of our own facets in our life exist to serve us in some way. So when we feel these ways, one of the things that I feel like in recovery I can appreciate more is like I am feeling anxious or I am feeling not so great for whatever reason about the situation. Is my energy best spent here right now, or is it spent somewhere where I can feel good about it and feel creative and like actually make actual improvement, rather than kind of like beating my head against the wall? Because I know a lot of people who might watch this podcast are those kinds of people. They love the grind, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not a knock, right? If you have something that you are really really passionate about, like definitely go do it. But I think like if you wanna maximize the efficiency of your actual progress in your everyday life, take the hints that your body's giving you. Understand why you're feeling that way. It's not necessarily a bad thing to put something down and come back to it later.
Mm-hmm. Where do you think this is variation on the theme? Where do you think the line is drawn with what your mind can do in a sense? I'm okay, like that's kind of a loaded question. I don't mean like you can control shit with your mind necessarily, but like if you think about it from the state that we've described and what I truly believe in, like I said, I don't have specific experience with it, but if your mind can control your body in ways that you don't even understand sometimes, right? And you have to really like do a lot of research and like introspection to fully let go of, right? And escape from, in a sense, and get kind of balanced again. What do you think your mind actually has the ability to do? Like your like I'm talking like your optimism, the way that you think, and everything like that. Do you think it expands any further into like almost I don't want to call it physical. I don't know enough about biology and psychology and everything, but like do you think that you can actually be healthier if you not like just believe you're healthier, but like if you have a better mindset about things? Like do you think that can play a part in anything?
I am beyond uh, Sure. Like I can say with absolute positivity and with great confidence that that is the case. So I know that it's kind of a meme on YouTube. I know that it's like a running gag sometime about all these gurus out there who are just mostly full of shit and trying to take your money. But the concept itself is not flawed. It's very true at its core. Whether people abuse it or not is one thing, but your mind definitely has the ability to have physical impacts on you for sure. I can tell
Mm-hmm.
you from symptoms I've experienced on extreme ends for the negative, it's 100% true. It's
Mm-hmm.
also very true on the other side.
Yeah.
People sit there and I guess it's a super easy thing to bring up. Like a guy like Kobe Bryant, right? The Mamba mentality, right? Everyone talks about how important it is to have that mentality because when you end up at the extreme end of that mentality, you do experience physical changes. Whether or not it always serves us well is up for debate, but you can definitely see the benefit of somebody where if I could be experiencing like the panic attacks at the magnitude that I was experiencing that, there is somebody on the opposite end of that spectrum that is like euphoric. Like,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not you want to determine if that's healthy or not is up to you. I would say all extremes in all cases is almost always bad, and like except in that's a whole nother conversation. But
Mm-hmm.
like your mentality affects your habit. Your habit affects your routine, and your routine affects your growth.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a stretch. It's not even uh, something that needs proof of concept. We actively see it every single day. Your mentality will eventually have a physical effect on you, and it's not necessarily always apparent in the way that we think that it's apparent, but like it's scientifically well documented. The more stressed you are, the more likely you are to like go gray and things like that. Your hair will fall out or whatever. That's like, you know, older stuff, but like we have, years and years and years of watching it happen to us in like live time, right? Um, for the thousands of years humanity has ever existed, uh, people always say like feel good, do good, live good, or some variation of that. There's a reason for it. Like cliches are cliches because to some degree they're true. I can tell you just by the amount of cleaning up of my own life that I've done, because I was like, not, as I said earlier, not always in the best spot, not always taking care of myself the way I should. It has had a physical effect on me to at least bring me back to neutral, to not always feel like I'm in a hole or like walking through quicksand or walking with like extra weight. It is profound the amount of power your mind has on your physical state of being, and that's why yeah, in accordance with like a podcast like this, it's important to have like a healthy way to spend your time. It's important to have a progressive approach to your life in terms of like how can I better myself in whatever way that you feel the need to better yourself. Because if you do the opposite, if you end up on the other end of that spectrum and you think about things that are going wrong, you'll impact your ability to correct them. And it's, like I said, thousands of cliches, but they wouldn't exist if there wasn't merit to it. So.
That is extremely interesting to me, just because I feel like that is part of the biggest thing that I try to implement in a sense. I don't know how. Like I've never actually looked up how to, just live a better life from a mental standpoint so it starts to affect you in all ways, right? But like, I mean, I can give random weird examples of just things that I believe to be true based on my experience. And it's things like I always try to be as optimistic as possible. I feel that I've gotten a decent amount of, I don't know if destiny plays into it at all, like with things that happen to you in the, and obviously everybody has different circumstances and stuff, but I feel like I've had almost like universal karma. I don't know if we can get into that. Like that might be a whole nother thing, but you know what I'm saying? Like that's helped me a lot. And just truthfully, like something as stupid as like believing that you're not going to get like a cold Like, I can't tell you how very infrequently I get sick just because I almost feel like I just don't even let it, I don't even worry about it. Like, it's not something that I try to let affect me. And I don't do anything crazy to mitigate those types of things. I don't know if that plays into it. I don't know if that has anything, if that's in line with, kind of what you described there. But those types of things is always something that I wonder. Like, we have all this resource, this huge resource, like literally right in with us in our heads all the time. And I just wonder, and I just have, like I said, I've never done enough research and tried to find any more on it. Like, there's got to be a lot of power there, and how can you utilize it to help you navigate life and help you have a better experience in life, mentally, physically, whatever.
Yeah, it's so to the karma thing and all that stuff. That's an interesting point because a lot of my path to getting better kind of went through Buddhism a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I particularly subscribe to all of the spiritual or religious things, but it's important to remember that sometimes your progress is going to come from weird sources, and that like places you wouldn't normally expect have valuable information for you. One thing I learned through uh, just looking into Buddhism and understanding it is that they are very firm believers that your mind is like a gateway to the divine, as well as other parts of your body, but your mind is like a big one. Um, and that's me like really like summing it up like in a if you could Buddhism in one sentence go,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So for them and like their understanding and their approaches to things, it's very much like mind over matter. Their discipline is pretty intense, and as we've already touched on discipline before, as far as like not believing you'll get a cold to not get colds, yeah, it's obviously not a bulletproof defense or anything. It's not like you can just be, I believe that if I walk into this lava, I won't die. Like, obviously, like, there's extremes, but to a limited degree, there's science out there behind this. It's not very well looked into, right? So like take it with a grain of salt, but like I'm willing to believe anything that like science is like researched for like extended period of time. They have reason to believe that when you feel good mentally, your the rest of your body will respond in kind. Put it quite simply. Your brain has the ability to affect things in a lot of ways. I don't think simply believing that you won't catch a cold is a good enough defense to prevent colds forever. But there's a bit of science out there that does speak to your immune system being directly affected by your mood. You are actually more likely to get sick if you are depressed than you are if you are not. I think it lends credence to a lot of certain ideals from Buddhism that I've taken, that your mind is much more effective at handling situations than we think. If we discipline ourselves enough to understand the extent of that, like to learn the extent of the power, you can easily use it to improve many facets of your life. Now, obviously, like you said, you're not going to explode a watermelon from across the room, and you're not going to like bend anybody's like will to your own with the sheer strength of your brain. But on the individual scale, it can have notable effects, I would say. Things that are relevant and worth looking into more scientifically. I would like to see people in that field definitely research that more, because in my experience, I feel that there's more credence to that than we know to be true right now.
Yeah. Well, I should probably look into it myself because I'm very interested in it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll see how, I don't know, my experience continues to go with those types of things. But yeah, I don't know. So that's all good info though as far as the mental health and everything goes. Do we want to move on? I know we got a couple other different types of topics.
So everything kind of like runs together
Yeah.
for me. Everything kind of ties in. So a really easy place to go from here. Like I said, I don't necessarily want to reiterate too much of the content from the previously well done podcast on your part, by the way. I enjoyed seeing Pete. So for me, to not like head that because it's very easy to do going down that like path of like society and politics and things from this way.
Right.
A way I would like to kind of keep that vibe of the conversation and like still remain on subject with the progress and stuff. So I fancy myself a bit of an armchair philosopher.
Yeah.
I like to think about the bigger picture of things. There's a lot of unknowns in the universe, and certainly I'm never going to figure them out. I won't even get close. But there's I think there's value through my experience with anxiety and stuff and trying to get better. It was always something about me that was there, and just kind of like a thing that I didn't really think about. But a lot of my progress in getting better comes through sitting here and thinking about a lot of things, which is very counterintuitive. You kind of don't want to get into your own head too much. So I can't say that this will work for everybody. Certainly don't do this if you're one of those people that struggle a little much with it. But for me, trying to reach an understanding with things that we currently don't understand is a big thing for me. I found that my Twitch and YouTube content, future YouTube content anyway, my Twitch content kind of embodies this idea that you should always be willing to explore the things that you don't understand and be able to entertain ideas for things that you don't understand, even if it goes against core principles that you have. So one cool concept that I've been thinking about a lot lately is based in like the duality or dichotomy of thought. And like I said, small confession to make. Another reason I would like to come on this podcast, aside from the fact that we have like an established relationship as being old teammates and having a bond that
You're
friendship.
doing it for personal gain. You don't have to explain. No, just kidding.
I'm here for the money. It's interesting because I think that like both of our approaches to life are drastically different from each other. You've touched on in previous podcasts and certain things that you've done, and I'm sure that many people who would subscribe to your kind of content would also feel this way. It's important to share multiple viewpoints. I'm far more of a collectivist than I ever have been an individualist. I think that like ultimately the success of the mass is more important than the success of the individual. Years ago, obviously, like when we were playing hockey and stuff, like I said, a less mature version of myself would sum it up as like we just have completely different ideas and just different viewpoints. Now that I'm older, the reality is there's different preferences on how to approach issues. The concept shouldn't be too difficult for people to grasp. This isn't like super incredibly hard. When we get to the spectrum talk, that'll be wild. But the idea that we're all like two sides of the same coin. My realization came that like I can be as collectivist as I want, right? But if we're a team and players on that team don't want to play, the team's not going to function. Alternatively, if you have people who are like super self-centric, the team can't work because now they're not playing with their supporting cast.
Right.
You can very easily fall into toxic holes for either side of this, and as with anything in life, you can fall into toxic holes. I think it's important to recognize for any political debate, any discussion you're going to have on like society, government laws, any of those things, it's important to remember, even if you have a different mentality and approach, you have the same end goal, right? I like to think that for all of us, with the exception of the crazies out there, and they seem to be growing by the day, we all just want to end up in a place where we're all happier, right? Like, at the end of the day, no one's sitting here just like, I sure wish I was fucking miserable. If I'm not on Facebook arguing with a 60-year-old dude over, like, laws involving, like, parking infractions, I'm just not whole. If, so help me, we ever get to this point where we could have civil discussions on the internet, mind-blowing concept. I think we'll have improved to the point where we'll be good enough to have, we'll have reached the end game of this discussion. But the important thing that always gets lost is that we have the same end goal. For me, I don't feel too good about my own situation unless I know that I have directly impacted others. For me, as somebody who plays plays sports or games the way that I do, I'm never going to be like the top star ever. And I recognize that. That's fine. That's just not my place. I have always been the supporting role, the cast, the people who elevate greatness. And the problem with individualism without collectivism, or collectivism without individualism to some extent, is you ignore the critical pieces to your success. Whether you want to admit it or not, they need each other at all times. You're tied to each other no matter what. So if you have somebody who's like excellent, right? Like the greatest among us in society, doctors, astrophysicists, chemists, biologists, like these fantastic minds who did a lot for themselves to be where they are because that's their passion, it's completely amiss to sit here and pretend like their success wasn't hinged on the positive things in their life. And then the other side, to kind of finish my example, it is ridiculous to assume that anybody on a team is just immediately equal in every facet to everyone else on that team. Like, we've been teammates. We've played sports.
Yeah.
I'm just going to pretty much just keep it honest with everybody, keep it straight. Like, our team was not very good until we added Mark and Burhan, who should hopefully be on the podcast at some point.
He will be.
We're looking for you. But it goes without saying that like we had our little collectivist like ideals here, and that's important to remember. Teamwork is ultimately critical to success, right? But teamwork wasn't getting it done. Not for this group of people, right? We needed people who were capable of elevating an entire group almost on their own, right? That's an individual making a big difference, right? You can't discredit that. You can't sit here and take away from what that one person was able to do. And surely, as a team, you're never going to get success just from one person, but you never know what one person can add to your group that makes the difference from being like 0-10 to 10-0. And it was literally that simple. We added 2 people to our roster. We went from being unremarkable, unrespectable trash to being the championship team in that league. That doesn't happen because of all of the things that we're so quick to generalize, right? Like, it's a simple metaphor, but one I think functions great and is something that we can both relate to, is I didn't improve the team until the team around me improved. Then I improved. We build off of each other. That seems like a generally collectivist ideal here, but the group can't get better until it's exposed to better. And when you see what it takes to like, hey, look, we can all get through this, but this is what I did personally to get to where I am. Until you've seen success, until you've seen like what that individual who attains like the level that you're trying to get to has gone through, until you have their experience, you're not going to get there. And you can sit here and have your preference on how to approach an issue. That's fine. And like I said, I would say arguably me and Mark have drastically different approaches to solving issues. But without the other, neither side's ever going to accomplish anything.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
So when somebody comes on, like you said, you see it all the time. It's the internet. People just want to be ridiculous. You see all this talk about somebody who is self-made. I can promise you they're not self-made. However, their individual effort separates them far greatly from people who are content to ride the coattails of other individuals. There's no disconnect between us and anyone else that exists on this entire planet. But you need to also remember that some people work really hard at what they do. And that shouldn't be forgotten. That shouldn't be tossed out just because, like, oh, well, they had a great support group. And it's fine. Fantastic. Like, you need a good support group to succeed. But some people have everything and achieve nothing because they don't have the right mentality. They don't have the ability to understand the situation that they're in. There's a lot of people, and like I speak with this more passionately because I have personally a lot of experience with this. You can have all the tools for success, but if you don't use them to build your success, then you will have no success. That's where the individualism and the collectivism, I feel, comes out, is that you need to do the thing. You need to be able to personally accept responsibility that you have to do this. No one's going to do it for you. And there's so many obvious cases of people who have just had like the greatest of the greatest situations. So many people who don't even understand inconvenience in their life, who go on to do nothing. With all of the power they could wield, do nothing. And it's because they've over committed to this concept of collectivism, that the group will take care of me, I'll be fine, I can just go about doing what I want to do without ever contributing in any way. I speak for that because that's my personal experience with the downfalls of my preferred way of approaching things, is that the whole team's got to be there. And if you got a couple weak links, you might only be as strong as your weakest links. I firmly believe also in that way that you can motivate those people to do the right things. I don't think it's ever a hopeless endeavor. I think you can reasonably expect human beings to want to benefit from having a strong group. For me, it's always easier that way. Maybe it's because I don't have that factor to me where I can just come in and be a big impact player right away. That's just never been the effect I've had on anything. But for me, I've also come to realize that like the people who do show up and do the significant things, do the important things, and elevate, that's the best way as a collective to improve anything. Is you need the people who are willing to put it on their shoulders, willing to do the hard things, and introspection, which is, relative to, like we've talked about a little bit for the anxiety thing, but even for things like progress in general, those who look to themselves for solutions often find solutions. People who look to others to find solutions usually find more questions and advice. And it's not that that's useless, but it's not answers. It's not solutions. You cannot solve a problem with somebody else's effort. It's important to remember where the power of your collectivism ends and the power of the individualism begins. As long as we respect both walks of life and understand that, there's a place for all of these things. Nobody is right or wrong. There is a place for all of these things. It's just being wise enough to know where that place is. That's what's going to get us to our best spot. That's what's going to get everybody where we need to be. It's important, like I said, a little biased, and it's kind of been looking forward to have this kind of conversations, because a few years ago, I would not have been able to come to that conclusion. I would have just accepted my simple approach, would have been good enough for me, good enough for my people, and I would have been it. And there would have been a lot of like just things missed out. Like, even if nothing terrible happened, you lose out on a lot of great things by not accepting the things that make us as individuals great, or maybe not going through with those things, not exploring them better.
So that's powerful stuff. The hockey example obviously hits home because it's very, you can visualize that quite well. And again, trying as I listen, I'm trying to do some introspection, try to think of like, because I've said that and you mentioned it like specifically recently, and it's actually, I try to wonder. I always try to go back to the root cause of things and like the way that we become the types of people that we are and the thoughts that we have, tendencies, preferences, and all that. And I think that I would categorize myself as more of an individualist, like you did as well, and I think it's because right now I'm doing everything myself, right? Like all the business stuff, and honestly, most of my life. I wouldn't say it from the hockey perspective. I think that now, and maybe I don't know how I can't remember how I was when I was younger, but like especially now though, like you start to realize that, no matter how good you are as a player on a team, whether it's sports or whatever, that you're not the whole team, and especially in team sports, it's one of the best learning experiences you can have. That you need everybody there, right? If you don't have a goalie, then you're gonna be playing with an empty net, right? So
Yeah.
I mean,
Some
it's
nights it felt that way. Anyway,
no, but like that's a great example. I think one a lot of people can learn from. And my question would be, as I try to sit here and think about the way that I handle things and my preference, and I think about it, is there flaws in what I'm doing? Or is not like, obviously everybody's right to a certain extent, but if I need to recalculate, how could I recalculate? And maybe it doesn't happen now, right? Like you obviously said, you went through like a period where a growing period, and we're never going to stop growing. So, but like just as a talking point is like, how do you take it to somewhere that's like almost, a little more efficient or a little bit of a better way to handle it? Is it collectivism, like you said up front, and then individualism to kind of put the effort in to change it? I think one of the things that I've said is like when I'm presented with a problem, like even a worldly problem, it's like, well, the I don't know. You can tell me how a collectivist thinks, but the way that I think is it's like, well, okay, there's a problem. There's a big problem right now in the world. Like, well, if I just handle what I need to do myself, if I just worry about myself, if everybody else just worried about themselves, then I feel like collectively we could get through it because I just feel that it's so much, I think I said in the live stream recently, I just think it's so much more difficult to try to worry and try to like, it's impossible to control other people. I just default right now, currently in my current state, I default back to the only person that I have any control over. Nobody else, literally nobody else, is myself. So if I only control and I know we talked about the word control, I'm saying it a lot now, but if
yeah.
I only have the ability to do the things that I need to do, have the thoughts that that I need to do, or whatever the actions may be of myself. If everybody else thought that way, I'm extrapolating obviously, but if everybody else thought that way, then maybe we could all get through it collectively, but we're doing it individually. The reason, and one of the things that I wanted with FBP, and one of the things that I thought would be a good idea, is to have a community of individuals, like a collective of individuals. So it's like it's just like a hockey team. Like you have everyone come together, and you can't do anything without the whole group. But at the same time, though, you have some people that are good at this. You have some people that are good at this. You have some people that are less good at A, B, C, or D. But together, that's how you get to where you want to be. So, like,
So I think with thoughts like that and concepts like that, you quickly approach what I would call the preferable portion of where we need to be as society. So like anyone who has that way of thinking, right, is looking at the bigger picture, right? And I think that's important, right? without like stumbling over my words too much, it's important to remember that like that way of thinking is correct, right? That's where we struggle so much, right? Is, well, I say that your way of thinking is correct. To a lot of people, that will translate immediately to it is correct, therefore superior, and then also the only way to do things. And I'm not sure why that is. I'm not sure why, as a people, we tend to do that. But there's many different solutions to a problem, right? So as I kind of touched on my own video about opinions, it kind of applies here. That mentality is great. It'll get you through 99% of pretty much anything you're ever going to face. There'll be that 1% though, in its life. You're going to encounter it. We have to remember that, like, because these things are intertwined, in the way that I believe that they are anyway. We have to also like accept it's like, all right, the tried and true method isn't cutting it here. Why don't we see what the other side has to say? And in this case, individualism and collectivism, I think at large should just do that all the time. For you to come in with that kind of mentality, to me, signifies progress, for lack of a better word. It's something that, like, I wish more people on these kinds of subjects subscribe to, because it is, in a way, that simple. If you have a bunch of people who are genuinely committed to getting the right thing done, getting progress, who are interested in wanting success, you'll collectively have success. That is, in a vacuum, in a perfectly contained environment, that is 100% true. You can't find any fault with that. Life is unfortunately not a vacuum. Sometimes we're going to be presented with issues that require more than just us taking care of our own business. It requires correspondence. It requires the ability to work together. You hear all these like great stories growing up, by the way, that kind of maybe simplify what I'm saying, make it more tangible for people who maybe don't bother with this way of thinking. It's not necessarily like a superior way of thinking, like I'm so much more intelligent, but like how many people like have time in their day to just sit down and just like introspect like all the time? I spend a lot of time doing it now, but like I remember there were periods in my life where like I really didn't, and I imagine that there's probably a lot of people that really don't. So while your audience, I don't think, would fall into that category, I feel like if you're here, you do a decent amount of introspection. The important thing is, like, if I have a message to anybody, if you share this podcast with your friends, and you should.
Yeah, you should.
You what's the thing you want to where's the good you want to glean from the bad here? The thing of it is like I can sit here and openly tell you, as somebody who genuinely believes in like the collectivist approach, that like he's right. There's not like a, oh, well, that's his opinion, that's like his thought. No, like he's right. It's just important to remember that like right doesn't mean 100% correct. Right means that is an effective approach and solution to pretty much any reasonable problem you can have. But it's life. Not everything's going to function in such a way that you can have 100% success in anything. That's where it's important to be able to go to the other side for the people who have the other approach, where it's like, well, what can I do to make things better? Is a great mentality to have. You should never not have that. There's also the reality that you have to look at, well, what are other people doing not so well? And then you can elevate them, right? So if you are the individualist who is the talented one, right? Like the person who, because I tend to find that that's the case. Like the more successful people, the people who have a maybe not like a brand, but like the person that tends to find the most success tends to be more individualist inclined, right? But you also tend to find that the least successful people are also individualistically inclined. And it's because where one person has found the correct way of being that way. There's another person who has only the terrible aspects of it. Individualism can lead you to great discipline, great levels of hard work, determination. It could also lead you to be incredibly selfish and uncaring.
Right.
And when you, even when you're successful, you can still have those bad traits. That's important to remember. Is like we don't have like a social setup that like punishes you nearly as much for being like just a selfish prick as we do is like providing something of substance, right? Like if some just guy invents the next big thing, but he's a major asshole. I mean, he still invented the next big thing. People are going to buy it, whatever your imagination wants to take that one. The problem with the collectivism is obviously like if you spend too much time looking at everybody else, you're probably not spending enough time looking at yourself. You fall into a victim complex. You begin to think that every failing is because of the failing of those around you. You also have to be aware that you are part of this team too. Even if you are 1% of a group, you are a failing 1% sometimes, and we're all going to be. That's like, no matter how dedicated or passionate or like, uniform to the cause you might be, it's not an insult to your loyalty or your dedication. It's just the reality. There are things you're going to do in a group that do not serve the group, and it's no terrible thing. It's no malicious thing, but we have to be aware of it. We have to understand that, like, for us as a working unit, right? You have to still be able to pull your own weight. You can't just set things down and let everyone else pull it for you. And I think that's where we have, like I said, a lot of the disconnect. I think people who want to subscribe to their mentality sees the flaws in the other one, and then they mostly only see the flaws in the other one, right? You always want to try and justify your own position. The less credit you have to give them, the more credit you can take for yourself. But like functionally, that's not how things actually work. You can be functionally flawed and still achieve a degree of success. We've seen terrible individuals abuse their power and end up being just detrimental to everyone around them. We've seen people, I'm sure we all know them, are people who are so quick to point the finger at anyone else but themselves for the problem. Both of those people needed the other side to balance them, because great individuals will bring valuable things to a group that the group can then use to improve themselves, and the group can make up for all the flaws of the individual to elevate them above a point that they wouldn't have been able to attain themselves. There's no separation here. They're connected. They're the same thing. You just have to remember where the actual solution comes from for each specific scenario. You'll find that there's a lot of overlap. You can solve a lot of issues doing either of those disciplines, either of those mentalities. But ultimately, they are not perfect. And where we would benefit, where we do our best work as a species, where we get our most progress, is when we realize that this is where I think the most intertwinement happens. Not everything I believe is correct, and other people can bring to the table certain things that I'm not aware of, so that when the day comes that they are unable to get to where they need to be because of their core principles, I can elevate them. It's like a constant leapfrog. It's everyone's springboarding off of each other, and that's why when you use a phrase like community of individuals, that is a lot closer to where we actually should be for actual progress as a society, a world, planet, universe. I don't know, there's aliens out there or whatever, but that is, I would say, more than a step. It's a couple steps further along than I think most people are, because we get comfortable and complacent in the things that make sense to us, and we're so quick to just dismiss things that don't, that we never bother to get to learn the other side. And even if you don't agree, there's good there. You can take good out of the bad. Even like the worst things that could ever happen in the universe, you have to try and find the good in it to take away. Because even if it's terrible, even if it's some horrible thing, and I'm sure you all have an idea, right? Like, we can go into a history book and just read from like the last like 10,000 years, every genuinely terrible thing. There's good in there if you know where to find it. And that's a skill set I think we should all learn too, is that like when you have this dichotomy and like even like a two-party political system that does not work, you can see the obvious like negative sides to all of this, right? Like you can see how things can grow incredibly toxic when you only have two mentalities, right? But if you align yourself to both and allow yourself to admit that like your preferred solution is maybe not the most effective one here, you begin to hit that extra 1% you were missing, like that X factor, that thing that you've been like, just like, oh, if only I could just, or if it's right there, I can't quite. That is it. And for me to be on like this podcast, like the thing I was excited about is to have this kind of discussion with somebody who feels so passionately about their mentality, because if everyone who was passionate was also rational, we would be single-handedly like a unified planet. We probably wouldn't even have countries. We'd all just be one happy bunch. But like, because we struggle with that so much, I think it just comes down to like conversations like these being the stepping stone, the first great important thing to do to eventually get to a point where, hey, maybe we're all not so different, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so like, I mean that the last part too, especially. How do you think? How do you blend those two of like, obviously passionate about like a certain type of mentality, the way that you handle things, your preference, and all that, and then blend that with like kind of define the rationale piece of it, like the rationalist, and like what's the next step that we kind of need?
So I actually think it's very simple, which is contradictory to like really hard, broad concepts.
Yeah.
It's very simple. Easier said than done, maybe. But we need to stop looking at each other as two different teams. We need to look at ourselves as like different segments of the same team.
Yeah.
It's really easy to divide. Super easy to divide.
Yeah.
It's very hard to come together. Why that is, I don't know. I wish I could tell you. It's commonly chalked up to things like tribalism on the internet. You'll see that phrase thrown around a lot. I don't inherently disagree, but at the same time, it's important to recognize situational differences. It's, for me anyway, one of the most critical aspects to getting anywhere in life is recognizing the where lines are drawn. Individuals can draw lines in different places, but I think like generally as a whole, we all know where like everyone falls in that area. For me, the answer is just really simple. We are all here for the same thing. Like, none of us who have this approach to life is looking to get anywhere but like a place that we find happiness, right? And here's the best part about this. Happiness is different for everybody on the planet. Not everyone is going to find happiness the same exact way. So you don't even really need to worry about being bogarted out. You don't have to worry about this like, oh, well, if they're happy, I'll be less happy, because it's not a thing. Mm-hmm. It's just not a thing that happens. That's not how life works. So we don't have to look at other people's success or failings as like good or bad things for us, because it really doesn't matter. It really does not matter how somebody else is living their I don't want to say it like that. It matters more in a simple sense of like, like I said, just kind of the ideals that we adhere to, but broader, like when you factor in everybody, it really does not matter if somebody else is living their best possible life for you to live your best life. I just think it's better for yourself and everyone involved to do your best to try and help people live their best life. And that's a big motivation to even be here, to have this kind of conversation on a podcast like this, is how somebody could look to themselves and say, like, how can I personally make this situation better for me, right? And my idea is, how can I make this situation better for everybody else? But the key thing here is we're both looking to make things better around us, right? Whether you believe that you're going to improve yourself and then use that to teach others, or if you think that you can already empower others to then feel better, it's positional, right? Like, we're all going to be on different sides of that coin. So stop seeing us, or group, the planet, whatever, like individuals, like that. It's not really how that works. It's just that we're at different phases on certain sides, and things are going to make us more comfortable, and we're going to stick to it. But we are not different. We are here to achieve the same things. We just want to be happy. We just want to live our lives. And someone else's success or failings, it doesn't matter. You can still do you, regardless. It's really just a matter of like understanding and respect, compassion. Like I said, even before earlier in the stream, basic human decency, which at times I feel is in short supply, depending on where you're looking. It's just, in my opinion, that simple. Now, how are you going to get all these people to come together for that? I don't know.
Yeah.
When we find that solution, I'm sure we'll be sending rockets to the next galaxy over. But
yeah, that's a tough one. That was an interesting. You had a very interesting line in there that kind of struck me. It was like, I can't remember exactly how you said it, but it was. Do you want to do something so your situation can be better, or the group's situation can be better, or like improve other people? And I don't know. I mean, obviously, this feels like a spectrum conversation. Like in a sense of, you don't want to have all of one, because both ways, you said, you can solve problems both ways. There'll be a lot of overlap, but you can't have it all without having both, in a sense. And I think that's really obviously the take-home point. But it's something that I've definitely, I don't know if I necessarily want to say I struggled with it or whatever, but it's like, I feel like I am individualist first, and then default back to collectivism at some point, maybe not as much as I should or whatever, but I feel like that is ultimately the way that I handle myself. Is I think, how can I make myself better? And then once I have that in order, how can I pass that along? The thing that I don't like, and maybe the reason that turns me off from collectivism at the start, is that I genuinely don't think that I am in any position to make other people better or solve those types of problems before I have this shit under control in my own bubble. You know what I'm saying? Like I use the example a lot with like personal finance. Like if I had no idea what the fuck I was doing with personal finance, and I had like debt and all this other stuff, then I would not. I can't even fathom like trying to help other people in that arena. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I invest a lot in myself. So then I feel, that's just my mentality, then I can turn around and I can bring that on to other people, right? The podcast, same thing. Like I did a lot of research from other people. Like I gained that knowledge from other people. And now one of my favorite things to do is like just consult or just talk to like young people that want to do the same thing. And then like, well, this is everything that I learned. This is everything that I did. Here you go. And that's kind of how I view it. I don't know if that's completely in line with the two and how you're supposed to use them, or maybe that one of the ideal scenarios, but it's kind of how I view it.
It is largely the duty of the strong individual to bring that information, bring what they can to the group to improve the group, as much as it is the group's responsibility to elevate the individual when they know that like they need that the X factor, I guess, so to speak.
Right.
You need to, and like I said, it takes wisdom, probably wisdom beyond like people our age have attained yet, right? Like I feel like I'm getting too old too quick, but like realistically, there are people who probably understand very well in like their 60s and 70s what like I'm trying right now to grasp, right? So for me, it's just like, well, we come to the obvious conclusion that you need both. Now, where's the line drawn, right? Where do we where do we begin to understand where we maybe our individualist slash collectivist ideals are not the perfect solution to this problem? Maybe we should look to the other side to improve. The example you give, I feel, is what I would call like a perfect example for you, for your idea. Like, right? Like the perfect one-to-one why you're right. And then you could have one on the collectivist end too. Like, if everyone's like only fending for themselves and nobody's looking out for the group, you could all be picked off one by like, for hockey, like if everyone's just kind of playing with, they're within their own head and their own mind, like the hardworking team will the better working team will probably steamroll them. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason for that is there will be things that are too big for you as one person to handle.
Right.
And then there will be situations where, as a group, none of you have the correct amount of expertise or skill or ability in this one thing to but between the group of you, you don't it doesn't stack. Like you're only as strong, I guess, in this case, as your strongest link, right? So you need somebody to step in to be a leader, and then that leader would have to lead. And that's where I think the way society is supposed to work is like leaders need people to lead, and people who need led need leaders, right? It's the in a good way to sum up like the individualist and the collectivist ideals is that the individualists are people who should probably be the leaders, and their greatest service at leaders is actually to help a collective, right? Whereas the collective who needs direction should be smart enough as a group to come together and realize which of them is the best for the situation. And then ironically, the collectivist's best use of their energy is to elevate the individual. And that's where, like I said, there's this disconnect for a lot of people. As long as you walk into situations with that mentality, it'll be so much easier in your day-to-day life to understand where the line is drawn. Now, you're never going to be perfect. No one's going to be perfect. You're going to default to your comfortable position as often as possible, because that's just what we do. But and if you'll forgive me the water for a second, the thing, like I said, to remember is always to glean the good from the bad. No matter how negative a situation can be, you never throw it in the garbage. There's always something you can take from it, something that you can use to improve. And the way it ties back into the collectivism thing is that you're never going to be right all the time. No matter how good your situation is, no matter how great it is, there's flaws. It's just inherent that there will be flaws. There will be people from the other side who will make you whole. And the sooner we all get on that page, because like you said, the line I don't even remember what I said at this point. I watched the VOD, but the greatest irony that we have as just a species on the planet is the idea that we need to constantly be fighting each other to support each other. It's really weird. We're so quick to throw up flags and borders to here's our group, and we're gonna do things this way, and we want to do things in such a manner that they come up with their ridiculous forms of government, whatever. You can point to any country on the planet. This is true in every case. You forget that you share that planet with those other people, right? They're not obstacles to overcome. They're not a problem to be solved just because they're different. And I think a lot of people think well, how can I get more people to think like me, when the correct thing to do is how can I get people to think in a way that fills in the gaps, right? You don't need to be everything, but you should all be something. If
that's a good
else.
way to put it. Yeah. I had an idea. It was another line. It was obviously you could just sum it up as just make sure that you utilize both individual and collectivism, and then kind of realize when when the time comes that one needs the other effectively, I guess is a good way to summarize. But I was like, I feel like people tend to forget the group sometimes, right? Forget the power of a group, the collective side, and people tend to potentially sometimes condemn the individualist. So if you think about it that way as well, just don't condemn the individualist and never forget the group. I think that's maybe another way to just like a small little way to summarize it as well.
This kind of segues a little bit into the other conversation it's definitely related. It's like on the same vein, but it's something. Um, we sure do love simplifying things as a species. Like I'm sure you've said it like 1,000 times. Like I just want to simplify it. Right? I just want everything to be simple.
Yeah.
The important thing to remember is that not everything in life is simple, and pretty much everything is extremely. If you want to get into the weeds, everything is incredibly complicated.
Yeah.
When we simplify things, we take certain things for granted inherently. Like we just kind of have an understanding of like a situation, right? Like once you've worked out the details, you can then just like streamline it. I think like we do have a problem as a people on this planet. We really love catchphrases and just lines of dialogue, real simple to remember things. And to touch on what you said, never forget the group, never condemn the individualist. Well, that's probably not right either, because, like I said, 99% of the time, sure, there'll be that 1%. There'll be that like one genuinely awful, irredeemable human being.
Yeah.
And then there'll always be groups of just genuinely awful, irredeemable people. And like, I hate using that word, right? Because the whole point of my argument is don't deal in absolutes. But it's like it's a really tricky way of thinking that, like, obviously I haven't mastered, right? But I think that this is the answer to like literally every problem we could ever have.
Yeah.
Is everything in life to an extent, everything, including this statement, right? So you run into this like paradox, right? Well, how does that make sense? The statement immediately contradicts itself.
Yeah.
It's just because everything in life is inherently flawed. Like we said it before, don't go bother looking for perfection. You'll never find it. Well, I can't present to you a statement that is completely correct. I think the minute we do, we'll divide the entire universe by 0 and it'll disappear. But like, you can't keep going through life just expecting like the simple easy thing. Like I said, we all love our principles, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have them, right? Principles are fundamental to who we are. They are critically important to how society functions, and without them we would be lost 99% of the time. Now 1% of the time though, your principle may not apply or doesn't exactly fit the mold for how a situation should be handled. There is great wisdom in everything that directly contradicts every great wisdom you will ever find. And that's important to remember. There's amazing advice you're going to get from people that will always just not line up correctly with other genuinely amazing people that also have great advice. It's because it's not for everything. It's not for literally everything. The minute we start trying this one-size-fits-all, the shoe goes on every foot thing, that's where we run into a lot of the problems that we have. Nothing will ever be that way. Everything should be taken case by case with all the details like considered, and that's tough, right? Nobody wants to sit here and go through the weeds on every single scenario, and I'm not like actively campaigning for like the removal of simplicity, because look, my lazy ass cannot be bothered to do some of this stuff. But like that's why there's a whole lot of us. Like, it doesn't have to be just us. It's important to remember, like I said, in the same way with the individualist collectivist thing, you need to remember that your principles only serve you so much, and at some point that there's other principles that are also incredibly valuable that serve you better in certain scenarios. Even if you don't subscribe to them most of the time, you can always say like, for example, like I genuinely believe in the idea of free speech because it's important that we be able to say things and have conversations. I agree with that to the extent that somebody goes publicly around and abdicating for the genocide of people. You know, like I think at that point you can say, okay, we're really not benefiting society this way. We letting somebody run around and be actively detrimental to literally every single human being who has ever lived, because let's face it, who's signing up for genocide, right? Like who's sitting here like, oh yeah, you know what, I think my people could probably afford to be wiped out, you know? It's not a thing, right? So we instinctually need to preserve a lot of these like things, because they're important in almost every case. But you need to also remember that like we're inherently flawed. We don't think of everything, right? Like there's going like any situation in life, you're gonna find something and just like there's a problem with that, and it's true. Doesn't make it wrong. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't do that thing, right? But like recognizing when maybe it's going wrong, maybe like I say, gets you over that hump. Maybe like you're not 99% now. Maybe now you're running on all cylinders. That's how you can truly achieve the closest possible thing we can have to perfection, is to understand that like there's not like one line ends and another begins. Like for concepts, there's a lot of overlap, and if there's overlap, you can theoretically achieve an ideal situation as long as you recognize that like our idea of ideal and perfect is not actually what perfection is. It's functioning despite flaws, not functioning without them.
I feel you. I would say there was one piece where I think you saying more introspection. You saying that like everything, the statement that you made, right? Everything in the universe to an extent.
Yes.
Somebody like me who likes to think in like, I try to think where I got this from. And, like my mom would always used to like make me lists and shit like that. And like I would, just very, very, very binary in a sense, right? Like, oh, this is done or it isn't done. Like it's that simple. So I think like so many years of doing that, and then just like now, even like with all the things that I'm trying to do, it's like I just want things to be as black and white as possible. The things that can be black and white, right? And I think sometimes I fall into this trap where I think, oh, well, if most things are black and white, then maybe I can make more things in a black and white because I want to simplify as much as possible, because I know on the grand scheme of things, everything is very complicated. But if I can simplify down the stuff that affects me, the stuff that I do every single day, just basically like, okay, like I'm trying to make like a routine for my week in a sense, right? So I'm just trying to go through the motions in a lot of those senses and get all that stuff done. The statement that you make, everything in the universe to an extent, and like everything is almost like with a grain of salt, because it actually, I feel like it somewhat to me, but I think a lot of people, it could cause some anxiety just in knowing that nothing is, you know, one or zero in a sense, right? Like everything is up for interpretation. Everything is on like a spectrum type thing. Everything is, up for debate. And I think that one of the things that I might need to do is take a step back and just kind of rework the way that I think about that, and just take solace in the fact that like, well, that's fine. Then maybe then that's the mentality that we take. And a lot of things are, and potentially everything is in this case where, you just got to be cool with it. You got to be cool and like accept the fact that not everything is ones and zeros. And there's going to be, a lot of times where maybe you're right this time, but maybe you're not right the other time. And you just continue to evolve and adapt. I think that's a big takeaway there.
Yeah, to bring everything full circle, like everything we've ever talked about on this podcast so far, it all kind of circles back to the same thing, and that's why I think like it to a lot of people might even seem like rehashing the same stuff. Oh, they've only said the same thing for like 2 hours now. Like when is it? But no, that's the trick. That's the thing to remember is for you, like not everything is one. Well, simplify things too much, you lose out in the details. You miss things. There's lots of stuff that could have served you better had you paid attention to the details. Alternatively, get stuck in the weeds, care too much about the finer details, you're going to miss the bigger picture. once again, it's not like a dichotomy. It's not necessarily like two opposite sides in the traditional way that we think. It's part of the same thing, right? So there's nothing inherently wrong with trying to simplify things most of the time. It saves us time. It keeps things moving, prevents us from getting stuck on one thing for too long. Obviously, there's value in simplifying things, right? It's just like sometimes when something more complicated shows up, we can't just look to our personal principles and go, well, generally I believe this, so like I'm just gonna run with that and then assume the rest of the scenario just fits that mold. It might not, and in a lot of ways, like we find out later, after such decisions get made, like man, if I had known about that at the time, or if I had just paid a little bit more attention, could have saved myself some frustration, could have saved myself a headache, you know. And then like for the other people, like I'm like an admitted like existentialist at times. Like I'll sit here and contemplate far too long on things that like now no longer matter. It's not that they never mattered, but like if you don't actively move in on things or like make something of a situation, the hourglass will run dry and your opportunity's lost. So like you can't also like sit here and be like, oh well, let's glean every little thing, every little grain of sand on this beach, because eventually you're gonna get to a point where like it no longer serves you.
Yeah, for sure. That's wild.
So it's like I said, kind of crazy, right? Because it all sounds like this is the same message over and over again for so many different subjects. I feel like that should ring home to people. Like there's a common thread here that teamwork here, guys. Like let your stars be stars, but remember that like for every flaw that we have as individuals, other people can help us make up for.
Absolutely. Yeah. So where do we go from here?
Well, obviously sports. So for me, I think that's like all the super heavy like conversations, right? Like, it's the meat and potatoes of the podcast. So we can have like the fun now. We can enjoy the subject matter for just being lighthearted at this point.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on the hockey thing before I give my thoughts on the hockey thing for August?
He's throwing the hockey thing out there. You know what, Dave? There's something that I have to tell you. You might not know about me based on your past experience with me. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I play hockey, but I do not watch it. Like I very rarely watch it, and especially at times like these where the level of uncertainty is unprecedented with everything going on. Truthfully, it's one of the last things that I have kept an eye on. Does that mean I don't care? Not at all. I would love to talk to you about this. So you're going to need to explain to me the situation before I can comment on it.
All right. So I wish I could say this is easy. It's not. All right. So for those of you, brief little segment here before we get into this. So we mentioned before we were teammates, we play a lot of hockey. So for the league we were in, like this man's a machine, right? So I spent a lot of time being like just like a genuinely bad defenseman, right? And then eventually like, I'll be a goalie, fuck it. So I ended up finding that I enjoyed playing it. I didn't really improve at being a goalie, like playing with a bunch of people who aren't particularly great at the game. He shows up and I learn pretty quickly what I need to do to like beat players who are better, because you play against Shield, Steel, Starp, and Shield and all this stuff, right? So how this ties into the sports conversation and like the fun part of this is so I have like known him to be like Mark and hockey are synonymous.
It's funny. I don't believe that's the case. I mean, I've evolved a lot since we started to know each other. But I mean, when you're in that community a lot and you're together a lot, then obviously that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like, so obviously there's more to people, right? But like Mark is a man of like few like complexities of routine, right? Like it's not like you said you like your simplicity, right?
Yeah.
So for you, like the hobby is mostly hockey, right?
Yeah.
You get free time, you're like, all right, I'm gonna play some hockey, and now you do content creation, right?
Yeah.
You're pursuing a future in something you believe in.
Yeah.
But like when all said and done, the dust settles, you just want to relax, have a good time.
That's the go-to,
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
the hockey, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear now that you don't care much for the actual professional league. And like I'm a super big fan of it, and that's
Yeah.
why I started playing like late in life. But I
Yeah.
started playing largely because I'm like love watching ice hockey.
Yeah.
So the situation, which is a doozy here, I'll
Yeah.
tell you, they've decided that they're going to play through August. They're going to have these 5 rounds instead of 4. They're going to create this bubble environment, which
I heard a little
scientifically
bit
and
about
in
that.
theory works, right? It makes
Yeah, yeah.
sense. Everyone comes in, quarantine for 2 weeks. Nobody
Right.
goes in, nobody comes out, whatever.
Right.
Any cases that get found, and they get taken care of, and they are gone by those 2 weeks. Now, from this point,
Yeah.
everyone inside the bubble is like clean, free of infection. They can go play the entire playoffs as long as nobody new gets introduced.
Yep.
There's no risk, right?
Yeah.
Sounds really good on paper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Life, I don't think, works that way. I don't think you're going to literally keep out every human being who is not inside the bubble.
Where is the bubble? I mean, there's Edmonton and Toronto. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the? Is it a whole? Is it the whole city? Is it just like?
Well, yeah, that's
like what the fuck?
that's the part where I think like the idea is flawed. So they've basically locked down some hotels, right? Like
Yeah.
one half of the conference to one side, one hotel, one half of the conference to the other side.
Yeah.
And basically, these players go from hotel to rink to hotel and not a damn place else.
Yeah.
Right? So you go nowhere if
Yeah.
it's not involving hockey. You can have food ordered in. Whatever you need picked up from the store, we'll get it from you. They have like personal sterilized drivers for these situations,
This
and
is
then people
fucked,
to
man.
like run things to the car. Like they thought of everything, right? But this is like I said, when complexity gets to be the problem. That hotel staff isn't going to stay in the hotel for
Yeah.
3 months while
Yeah.
you guys play a season
Yeah.
or like a postseason rather, right? They're going to go home to their families. They're going to go,
They're gonna go
live
everywhere.
life. Yeah,
They're
they're
gonna
going to live life. It's not containable like
Yeah.
for anyone who's not wearing the NHL shield. So like for me, I'm not necessarily saying that I don't want to see hockey.
Yeah.
But I think like considering the current climate of the world, I'm not so sure why they're pushing so hard for this. Like I don't I know
have
that
an
there's
idea.
a significant financial
Oh,
loss.
yeah, there we go.
But like is that where we want to be, right? So like you can do this quarantine thing for the postseason, right? And it's short term, and I guess the idea is that like it doesn't last nearly as long. So maybe you can get away with this because it's not as long. But like, what's the plan for next season then? You're not going to have like a bubble for the entire league. So, I mean, if we're at a point now where like you want to play hockey, you don't want to risk infection, and you can do this for the postseason, but like you don't think it would stretch over the course of a regular season, then like why not just cancel and then come back at the usual time when you've had a few more months to like work out the details? If it could even be worked out at all, I would wager that you can't solve this problem the way that they would like to solve it.
Yeah.
It's hard to say because I'm a fan. I want to watch hockey, right? And the bubble thing sounds great for like the 3 months that they have to do it. Like there's very little risk in that like time frame, I would say.
Yeah.
But like what happens if the bubble pops, right? You got to shut it all down. Like now you've lost even more money on this because you have all these arrangements that are paid for and now are going to waste.
So a couple things. One, I will comment on the hockey portion of it, like the fandom. And I will say that normally don't watch every Penguin game. I like going occasionally, right? We play ball hockey, obviously, so it's a little different than ice. It's the same thing, obviously, and you have that piece of it. I don't know why I don't watch it more. I think it's just because I'm always doing other stuff, or I'm playing. I'd always rather play than watch. That's pretty much what it always came down to. So that's, I think, part of it. Love watching playoff hockey, though. Especially, we've been absolutely treated in our lifetime with our teams, and for the most part, I mean, like obviously since Sid, and then like before us with Lemieux and everything. So, I think that's tremendous. The other thing that I will say though is I am super excited one of the only reasons that I'd be excited to see something like that is, one, it's an interesting dynamic to see if they try to pull that off. It'd be interesting to at least keep up on and see it once in a while. I personally have a love, I don't understand why, but I have a love for the sounds of ice hockey without like the ridiculous noise and stuff. Like, you know, when you go to
the
a game,
crowd, the skates on the
yeah, the
ice,
skates
and the
tearing into the
sticks.
ice and the puck hitting the stick, like it's, you don't see it in ball. I mean, you don't get it in ball hockey, right? So like, I love that sound. Like when they show practice clips and you can hear, like, I love that. That's yeah, I love that. So I wanted to see it as like a live broadcast where you could hear the sounds of the game. I love mic'd up stuff. I mean, they're not going to do that obviously on national television. They're not going to let you hear the trash that they spew. But you know what I'm saying? I would love that part. I was excited right before all this started. We were going to play Columbus, I think, with no fans, and then they canceled that game. I was excited to see that. But all that aside, I and this is where we're going to get into the part where I've been confused for 7 months. I am confused about like that specific scenario where like what is it just to continue to mitigate the infection rate of this of COVID-19? Like what is the, I don't really agree with them necessarily doing it, but I mean, I'm actually a hypocrite too, because like I play hockey and you know, we've continued to do that, not obviously at a massive scale or anything like they're doing, but like I'm just kind of confused, like, and it's too simplistic of an argument that I would make, but like aren't they, isn't everybody still kind of living their lives in a sense? Like, aren't people still going out? Like, they're just not together. Like, what's the difference between like the NHL doing that and then like, you know, a community of people like getting together and all that sort of shit? Like, I think that the issue is obviously much bigger than that. I don't want to take it into the COVID talk right away, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I always bring it to that because it's like, well, that's fine. Obviously, money is the motivator. Like, obviously. Like, I knew that this was going to get real interesting when the people that had the money got affected, right? Like, obviously, we're taking it right into it. But, you know, but like it all relates. When everybody's saying, like, you know, obviously a lot of people were out of work, still out of work, and they're struggling financially. But not many people tend to give a shit when, like, people that didn't have a lot of money, you know, were being affected, right? That seems to be the thing. I don't necessarily consider myself to fall into that. I've been fortunate enough, you know, that we haven't starved or anything. But there's obviously people that have been terribly affected by everything that's going on. But once it starts to creep up, and now like all these months where they couldn't finish the season, they didn't have all the fan revenue, I'm assuming. Now, you know, obviously baseball isn't involved. Football, I'm sure, is going to get affected somehow. Like, what happens when these people that are used to having all this money start to lose money? It happened with, didn't it happen with the companies too? Like, didn't a lot of people that didn't really need money initially apply for like loans and things like that, like whatever, the paycheck and protection and everything? So, I mean, to bring it back to like a more specified thing, like, I don't necessarily think that it's a good idea. I do think that there's a very good likelihood of that bubble getting popped because, like, I heard a little bit about in the NBA, like, people are going to complain about like the nutrition, that they're not, you know, used to getting the whatever quality of food they're going to end up getting. They're not going to be able to perform or whatever. And I think athletes, some of them at least, are just used to doing whatever the hell they want to do, right? So they want to go out, they want to do this, that, and the other thing. I think it's going to be real interesting to see what happens. I don't necessarily know if I agree with it or not. I just personally like for all this to be over.
So the hard and fast solution to this problem is something that people wouldn't want to hear. That being said, I'm not here to preach about necessarily the global cure for COVID here, as much as I am just to say, like, how it's more impacted us, like, I guess, you know, obviously the progress standpoint. So for me, I agree. It's weird. Like, people who didn't really have a whole lot of money, who would be much more severely impacted by this kind of situation, typically get tossed aside in favor, like, you know, of just whatever. But then, you know, when somebody who gets like literal millions of dollars in revenue because they run the show gets affected, suddenly it's a much more massive problem.
Yep.
And I don't necessarily want to get into the like I said, into certain parts of how that conversation can go, though my opinions on them are pretty strong. If you know me on Facebook, you've definitely seen it.
Right.
I would like to keep it on the subject at hand, is that you can't reasonably expect a whole bunch of people to actively risk their own health and safety for basically a pittance, right? Like if you're gonna be out here doing things in the world right now for anyone for financial gain of their own, whatever. In this case, talking about the NHL and the millionaires arguing with billionaires. The unfortunate reality is that there are people who are going to be in there that are not the athletes, nor are they the owners. They're probably like the cab driver who needs to be paid for this sort of thing, right? And there's probably hundreds of like concession stand workers that just don't have jobs that would normally. I mean, this time of year they probably don't, but I don't know. Some arenas have stuff year round, right? They probably have the same staff, so it's really hard to put it into a certain give it a tagline, put it under a certain even microscope either, right? It's such a grand thing that we're going through. Like literally haven't had one of these in 100 years. You can't say anything's for certain, but I would like to at least say in terms of it being interesting to watch. I would agree. I think that like if nothing else, this is a fantastic science experiment. Like the moral portions of this all aside, like there's reason to keep an eye on this, right? Whether we learn from it for the next pandemic 100 years from now, I would hope so. But like, it's hard. It's hard to like envision how this is going to be, right? Like it's such an abstract concept. Like no fans in the arenas. The players cannot do the things that they would want to do. They're basically like stuck inside this like little area, and then like finances being the big motivator here with the owners like hemorrhaging money. But like if if I'm a player, right, like especially if I'm Max Domi, for example, just because he's the easiest example. He being diabetic is at like far greater risk than anybody else, right?
Yeah.
So like what's he to do if he goes into this bubble and then one of his teammates decides to be a jackass, right? Like even if that like player like, all right, you broke the bubble, that's against the policy, we get rid of you. Like he could bring that infection back. And, like even in that like small window of time, like affect everybody, right? And that's like the shutdown scenario, right? That's where like the NHL like, all right, pull the plug, bubbles pop, we gotta pull out of here. That's where like I think I kind of lean on the probably shouldn't be doing this kind of thing because fun fact, you get that many people in an organization together, I guarantee you some of them are going to be careless assholes. Like it's just going to be what it is.
No doubt.
And even if you're not, right, even in an absolutely perfect scenario where everybody has everyone else's best interest in mind, like because of the nature of the situation, people can mess up by accident and bring this thing. Like we don't really have to sit here and pretend that it's like a purely malicious thing or purely like ignorant or somebody's just being careless. Like you could be as careful as you want in this scenario and something can still go wrong. There's just too many moving parts. So as far as like, they said the complexity, definitely interesting. People who got money at stake obviously have motivations to do this anyway. Is it the right call? Probably not. But I mean, like, you can't reasonably expect us to do nothing, right? Like, something has to give at some point. I just think that like if we were better at handling this than we were, and like I said, this is dipping in a little bit uncomfortably close to politically, right? But like we have so many other examples in the world right now. I just feel comfortable saying it because it's still somewhat relevant. If we had just handled this better from the get-go, whether it's like mistakes, irresponsibility, whatever you want to chalk, I don't care what side of the aisle you are on this. If it was just handled better, maybe we're not having this conversation. Maybe we still actively just have like hockey would have been over months ago. like we Cups awarded. Fans got what they paid for. We're looking at the off season right now. Somebody's getting paid entirely too much money to not make the team. Like, the text group that I'm in for just bullshitting about hockey, man. Like it's like real somber. I just think like collectively the NHL has got their finances in order, I guess, but there's a cost. There's a cost to everything, even if it's not financially. You need to consider everything. It sure sounds like they tried. There's no lack of effort in this plan. I hope for the best. That's what I got.
I don't know. I mean, only time will tell. We'll see what happens. But I mean, you lay out a good argument there, and I stand by it as far as what they're doing. I don't understand how it could possibly not. I don't see how it could possibly work perfectly. Like, it just seems highly unlikely, and I think that money is going to be the motivating factor in these types of situations, truly, because they've sat around for a while and they're just, well, fuck it, like we're gonna try to do something. Obviously, they're trying to take precautions, but I don't know. This situation has been so stressful and so exhausting, even on a small level, just because there's no answer. There seems seemingly no answers. I don't know right way, wrong way to handle certain things, and now you have, like we said, bigger places trying to do things that, like, granted they're taking some things into account, but it just doesn't look like it makes a lot of sense when you break it down like that. So then other people are going to be pissed that those things are going. I see it all the time, not with the NHL, but I see with other stuff. It's like, oh, well, they're doing this. Why can't we do this? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. So I guess maybe the only thing we can do from all that is try to learn from next time.
Yeah,
next time.
My collectivist
Hopefully I won't be here.
Is that Dr. Fauci is a fantastic individual, so I'm going to take his advice. As far as the social issues that are surrounding it, I don't even want to necessarily go into it. But I guess it needs to be addressed to even say what I want to say. Is like, there is no morally right or wrong here. We are against a virus. It will kill you if you are a communist or a capitalist. It will kill you if you are Chinese or American, as that's well documented. There's no shortage of people this thing wants to completely end, right? Now, whether or not you be it or not, well, you can sit here and talk about death rates. There's numbers all over the place. There's so much misinformation. To an extent, you can only even blame people so much because, like, some people have their positions on that based on completely falsified information that, like, I'm from the dark side of the internet, okay? When I was, like, a edgy teenage kid, I spent a lot of time on some websites with some bad reputations. Like, we did disinformation campaigns for fun. You remember the put your iPhone in the microwave thing? Yeah, those are my guys. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that, like, I actively condone this stuff now at 28 years old, but at 16 it sure was fucking funny. That being said, like, whether you want to sit here and debate right or wrong, the progress thing, the dichotomy, the all things come full circle, to kind of bring this one all together here. Remember here that if you are fooled by misinformation, it is forgivable to certain extents. Not everything out there is immediately fact checkable. Not everything that exists is so easy to prove or disprove immediately when it's like just such a broad statement for the things that we see all the time. However, it is your personal responsibility as a human being to do your best to make sure what you are sharing is the truth. We owe that to ourselves. We owe that to everybody we know. I don't think that there should be anything controversial about saying we should all be actively looking to find the truth. Now, there's going to be a lot of people who can raise arguments for either of their side. Realize this, though. If you truly do care about everybody around you, you will do the right thing even if you were wrong. As a perfect example, very early on into this coronavirus scenario, I was definitely one of those people who was saying, slightly stronger flu, not a big deal, nothing to see here, right? That was based on information that was given to us from China that was incorrect. Whether you want to say they maliciously misinformed us or simply gave us what they truly believed to be the case at the time, that's what you call the narrative you want to spin. Frankly, it doesn't matter. We are where we are. And it is up to all of us to do the right thing and try and find an actual proper solution with the facts. Unfortunately, and this is going to suck for a lot of you, there are a lot of people out there that just want to watch the world burn. I know some of them personally. I've spent a lot of time on the internet with not so great people. In my youth, I hung out with I mingled with crowds I probably shouldn't have been bothering with, and there's a bit of regret on my end for that. In the same way that I regret telling people at the time the things that I did. I have my defense in that like it was based on information we had at the time, but now I'm obligated to change my opinion based on facts presented. I feel like if you want to call yourself a good person or somebody who means well, you must have that quality. You have to be prepared to admit when you're wrong. You have to be prepared to make the changes that are necessary to do the right thing. You win nothing. There's no award here for sticking to your guns if you're wrong. You just look like an idiot, right? And whether or not you can sit here and say like, well, we don't know who's right or wrong. Trust me, there will be a point when the dust settles. Some of you will be wrong. Do you want to be wrong and courteous, or do you want to be wrong and an asshole?
Yeah.
And I think like just be good to people, right? Like you can believe the things that you want to believe. We'll find out the truth one way or the other. But like no one is like immune to this virus. Like even if you are literally immune to this virus, it could kill people you care about, right? Let's just be nice. Let's all come together. Let's not allow something stupid like this conversation on masks is ridiculous. Like I have a strong feeling about the masks. I'm not going to sit here and get into it, but like me like actively going out to campaign one way or the other doesn't stop the virus from doing what the virus does. Remember who the real enemy is here. It's not people.
Yeah. No, that actually that part right there, that really hits home because like it, regardless of how this has happened, I feel like that has transpired where like there's two sides like kind of most of the time going at it on this different stuff like back and forth, and that's really divisive and really shitty, and I don't like it at all, and I think it's counterproductive. So that's where the enemy of the people is. However, though, I also think that like to a certain extent all of that has transpired in like if you hear somebody that you know or that you've like is in your sphere, right, like somebody in the area or something has like coronavirus, it's like immediately they're like a leper or something, which obviously like I mean, yeah, you shouldn't necessarily go by them. You shouldn't like you should try to have it stop with them so it doesn't jump to the next person or whatever. But I'm just saying like it's kind of, I think it's like made, I don't know if we want to go into like all that sort of like the reasoning that we're here for all that sort of stuff, but I just feel like it's made people that are infected like the enemy to a certain extent. I mean, like there's obviously a huge level of empathy, but at the same time it's like, well, no, don't do that. Don't go near them. I mean, obviously it's for everybody's benefit. It's just weird. I don't know.
Yeah,
just the weirdness of the perspective has just fucked me up.
Yeah, you have to be able to separate the situation from the people. It's Yeah, I mean, stay away from somebody who's actively infected, right? But don't like dehumanize them, right? Like it's kind of the important thing. It's just that it's so incredibly contagious, and that's true. It's just that people do have, I would say, a reasonable fear. It's not like we are expecting people to just kind of kind of forget the reality of this thing. But far too often we get this problem where like I had a an encounter with a friend. It was literally, I think I've been out to socialize twice during all of this. And it wasn't just strictly socializing, it was socializing with an objective. So I justify it to myself in that I one of my friend's jobs were on the line, and I was the only one who was able to help with that particular scenario at the drop of a hat. And then the other scenario was there had been some drama going on, and while drama is not necessarily the most important thing in the world, it was surrounding a situation with a wedding, and I was supposed to be in said wedding, and it kind of needed to be handled. Probably could have been handled in other ways. I chose to go see them personally. So make of that what you will. I'm not going to say it was the smartest decision, but I felt like it was the best way to handle the situation. Turns out one of the people involved in that conversation had the virus and had it in that time frame. To this day, I have no idea if I had it or not. I had some like weird funkiness over like that 2-week period. I don't know that I would call it symptoms, but it was more or less like it was surreal to me because I'm like, whoa, fuck! I was like immediately in the vicinity of somebody, right? And I think like right now this is where the conduct matters. So like I just they told me about it. I talked to them like, hey, look, you're cool. Hey, like that's life, like I made choices here too. So like I mean now I gotta tell my family and stuff. I gotta do my best to quarantine myself and keep make me as like minimally as dangerous as possible, I guess, for lack of a better way to say that. But like minimize my like blast radius here, right? So I found out, fortunately, like within like the first couple days. So I mostly just spent time in my room after that. Unfortunately, for other people who were involved in the scenario, they did not get treated well by people. That's what sucks. So my significant other, she was with us that day. She was supposed to be in the wedding, and then she had also made a promise to a friend to go hang out with that friend. Well, obviously, when I get the news that we were exposed, obviously we were exposed at the same time. I told her. So she did the responsible thing to do. You definitely tell the people that you had hung around with. That's what you should do. They did not treat her very well. They were mad at her. She kind of got like the cold shoulder from them for anything that wasn't like test results. They started acting like this was like, almost as if she had done it intentionally. Like this was some secret evil plot to like contract the virus and spread it to people.
Yeah. And
like, you can sit here and say irresponsibility. Sure. You can sit here and say that it was a dumb decision. I'm not here to debate you on that. I will make many dumb decisions in my life. I will agree with you that they were dumb decisions, but they're going to happen. That being said, what purpose does it serve to like shit on that person who was supposed to be your friend, by the way, like after the fact, right? Somebody catches it, they could spread it. Yeah, that's a problem. I'm not saying that it's not, but like in regards to treating people like lepers, like you got to remember, like they're human too. Like you can't, even if you like disagree. And like I said, I'll get into a shouting match on the internet. I like flinging insults. I come from like the Xbox 360 Call of Duty lobby days. Like I love getting into like I create quite a bit of havoc sometimes in the comment sections, but if I'm like looking at a real situation to me, right, like something like some like super hardcore like ridiculous like anti-masker who's like also believes that the planet is a Jolly Rancher and the moon is made out of like fucking cottage cheese. Like there's always going to be ridiculous, crazy people out there who happen to have similar beliefs to other people who are like, far more rational, and like, dismiss them. I'm not going to sit here and discuss the conspiracy theory that octopus have like a secret society in the ocean. Right? Like I'm not here for that. But like we have this like tendency to bundle everybody in the same category, and then she's like, well, I disagree. I disagree with anti-masks like ideas, right? Like to me, like that's just something I feel. However, like I also don't understand the point of like going out of my way to harass people about it. Like, yeah, it's something they probably shouldn't do. I would actively tell them that they shouldn't do it, but then like there's like entire hate groups dedicated to these people. How do you have the energy to hate people? Right? And then like there's the other side of the spectrum, right? Like you're gonna get people who fall into that category, and they're just complete and utter psychopaths. There's like no other way to describe them. They do not care about anything other than themselves. And like we see that one particularly terrible person, and now they represent the group, right?
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, how that kind of like ties in with like treating people like a leper is you catch the coronavirus by accident, by irresponsibility, by sheer circumstance. Everyone thinks that you're like this massive problem now. When we stop treating people like people, we start introducing other problems that are we don't work towards a solution. We start introducing problems. You can't just expect everyone in like a shutdown, quarantine, whatever circumstance you happen to be in. Like this has been since the beginning of March. It's getting uncomfortably like we're in the middle of July. Like Halloween is right around the corner.
Yeah.
That's a long time for people to be shut down in one place. You can debate solutions that could have been better. I'll probably agree with you depending on what you say. Like there's a lot of ways that this could have been dealt with better, but we're here now. Like we gotta stop treating each other like garbage. You know, the virus is doing a good enough job treating us like garbage. Just like regardless of what you believe or how passionately you believe it, it's you know we all matter. We all matter here. And like you can spin that sentence however you want. I know what I mean. Anyone who knows me personally knows what I mean. It's about just doing what's best for everybody, and usually what's doing best for everybody, as Mark would say earlier in the stream, is usually doing what's best for yourself first. So, everything comes full circle. The whole podcast, everything we talk about, it's all the same concept. I just would like, we can be nice about it too.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's great advice. I think that is exactly, a tremendous mindset to have, and it's a weird time we're living through. No question about it. Hopefully, we continue to get it under control one way or another. But time will tell with that as well. And I think that I like that though. I like just being nice to each other. I think that's a good strategy. And just continue from there. So, but we've done almost 3 hours. Actually, no, over 3 hours here. So this has been solid.
A record.
A record, yes, indeed. Okay, so in lieu of any more topics, do we kind of hit on everything? You think?
Yeah, everything. I think.
Yeah. Well, you can always come back.
Yeah. I'm calling you out, Pete. You better be here too.
Yeah, we're gonna have group episodes. And we're gonna have a little round table. Hopefully not in a garage at some point, but yeah. So
mayhaps in a larger garage.
Yes, maybe in a larger garage. We'll see. But ceremonial, as is tradition here that we're trying to do here.
Setting tradition, of course.
Yeah, absolutely, because we're barely into it. I want to ask you these couple things here, because I think they are always vital to the audience to get this specific perspective, and these might change over time. But again, if you listen to the last podcast with Pete Mullins, you kind of know what's coming here. But Dave, my question to you is, who are your top 3 influences? And I don't mean just celebrity-wise or just in your life or whatever. It could be anybody. But again, I'll tell you the same thing I told Pete, is if they are in your life, that's awesome. If they are not in your life, then other people could potentially, obviously, benefit from that too. It doesn't need to be people per se. It could be groups. It could be anybody. But like, you seem to have, just from our conversation here, obviously gone through a lot of research and experience with mental health, and then also, collectivism versus individualism and all that sort of stuff. So where did you really get most of that, or who influenced you there? Or what do you think your top 3 are overall?
So for the neutral one here, because I can give you an example for all of those. But one that I think is like really interesting, right? So this is like less about what we talked about, more about just like somebody who's impacted me as a human being,
Mm-hmm.
just in general.
Yeah.
So anyone who knows me knows that, all right, anyone who like understands from a music perspective, which is different. Not everyone cares about my opinion on music, and that's fine.
Mm.
But music, I feel like it influences all of us to some degree. We all have our favorite artists. I'm no different. My big influence from like my teen years, which is like probably my most like critical and formative years, is Neil Peart for Rush.
Okay.
He was a high school dropout who
Yeah.
ended, for those of you who don't know, he's a
Yeah.
high school dropout who ended up just being a drummer for a band.
Yeah.
But like anyone who could go back and read his work, unfortunately, he recently passed away in January.
Mm-hmm.
He was a genius. He was somebody who could think and perceive on a level that I think is like should be considered very very high level. A man of like great levels of respect, a man who's endured a lot of personal trauma and pain, and found a way to make good in the universe despite it. And maybe that is the ultimate message that like
Mm-hmm.
this podcast for like
Yeah.
my point.
Yeah.
So for him to have gone through what he's gone through and still find a way to live a life that gives something back to the world, I think that is probably for me the heaviest influence for where I'm at now. Just trying to do some good for the planet. For the collectivism thing, that's definitely more recent. For me, collectivism is not necessarily a one-person ordeal, obviously. So
Mm-hmm.
it'd be a little ironic to be like, oh, this one
Mm-hmm.
person inspired collectivism. But
Yeah.
I think for me, it's actually, I'm going to throw it to sports.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to, like I said, used to game all the time. I used to be at a pretty high level for some of the stuff without like going down the list. There's a lot of them. I competed at everything that I did. I wish I could reattain that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like playing on sports teams in general, and everyone who wants to get a good idea of this themselves, I would recommend playing some kind of team sport or cooperative activity. You never really understand just how impactful it can be to have a bunch of people working towards the same goal. When you have everyone dialed in, when you have clear and obvious alliance and this objective, you can achieve a lot of things that you never think you would be capable of. And go back to the hockey team. Like
Mm-hmm.
we, our team sucked for a while. We weren't on the same page. We bring in a leader, we bring in some like help to like teach us and elevate, and it all clicked together for me, right? I played like a very individual position, right? Like playing a goaltender is like you're almost competing more against yourself than you are against the other team. I felt like that was my best place because like defense didn't work out for me so much because I had to rely a lot on my partner to make up for my shortcomings. I had quite a few shortcomings. So
He's hard on himself.
I'm real, but yeah, for me, it's just like sports expose the idea that not only can you benefit from being very good yourself, but like how much better other people can make you. So that little long-winded explanation. As for the sorry, what was the?
Oh, I just said like examples for mental health, just the things
so-
that you've researched and had some sort of influence somehow on you, right? So
Yes. So for mental health, that is obviously something that strikes very close to home. I've dealt with it a lot. A lot of people, now that I know later in life, and I'm able to recognize that they have also dealt with it. Sometimes I would say like undiagnosed, like I'm not a doctor, I can't diagnose them, but like I see a lot of parallels. There's a lot of things to understand, and people who work in spite of all of the things that they deal with on a regular basis, I would say Robin Williams is probably one of the greatest people because I think humor is like a universal like cure for a lot of like terrible things in the universe, and
Yeah.
sometimes like your humor can be like dark. I'm not here to judge, but when you can get humor from the situation, it's at least an opportunity to find once again positivity in the negative. And I think that that's like such just a pivotal critical thing to me right now in life. So it's no secret that he had been dealing with demons. Now like he passed away under the unfortunate circumstance of taking his own life. It's all much more well documented now than probably would have ever known. And that's the thing, is somebody who, while actively dealing with all of these things, chose to do many great things, for their personal works, but for a lot of people out there. Everyone who really knew him as a guy who meant well and always wanted to try to do what he could to make things around them better. So for me, I would say he is probably the single best mental health related inspiration, because even though a lot of people would look at how he passed and say that like there's that there's like this great darkness to it, it's ultimately it comes for all of us. The reality of it is even though he wasn't able to personally conquer his own demons, how many other people out there have been able to because of him?
Mm-hmm.
And it's important that like while I'm still here on this planet and have this understanding, this experience, this like direct line to this issue, I feel like a sense of obligation to in some way bring some good to the world with it, even if like I'm still going through it. Um, the ability to persevere despite is one that is um, probably the most respectable quality you can have in any human being, and we're all going to have our own challenges in life. Him I relate to more than a lot of other people because I didn't touch on depression as much. It's present. It's something I've dealt with my like entire life, but um, for him and like how he impacted so many people, um, anxiety, panic attacks, I can make a positive change. So I'm actively choosing to do so, and I think that's the greatest message I can get from him, is that like even though that you're dealing with this, you're struggling, imperfect, whatever, you can still do good. You can still do a lot of good.
Yeah. That's powerful. I would agree as well. I think that Robin Williams has. I don't know if he's had a huge effect on me personally, but I always loved his work, and I was sad to see him go there. So, but no, those are great influences, my man. They all resonate with me, and I hope that our audience can benefit from that as well. I know they can. So, second big question of the three is, what is, and it's a loaded question, but what is your overall best advice? We probably heard it a little bit throughout the podcast episode here, but like if you just had to give people advice just in general, how would you kind of summarize it?
So you're not or ever will be perfect, and no concept, ideal, principle, or anything that you hold on to will ever be good enough for every single situation. Uh, you need to be able to have the courage and modesty to look inward, to know when you might not be correct, to find what is correct. And that is the most important thing, I think, in the entire world, because we will all benefit greatly, and you yourself will benefit greatly if we stay humble, but recognize, or stay humble and recognize that not everything, if we were truly as like great as like we think a lot of these like concepts are, we wouldn't be having these problems to begin with. So other people bring a lot of value to life. Other people exist and do a lot of good things despite having different ideas and thoughts that you have. So glean the good from the bad and understand when maybe it's somebody else's time to do something that you normally wouldn't follow, but if you have the ability to introspect, you recognize that, hey, this is not my time. This is theirs. We can all move together, and that's important. Move together.
Yeah, I would agree. That's tremendous advice, man. So, last question, totally on you, because this is the piece that I want to make sure that we talked about. I think before we jumped on here, I want to make sure that everybody that is so nice enough to come and sit with us here on the podcast. What are you doing now? What are you moving? What do you like? If you want to plug anything, if you want to tell people where to find you, make sure that we have all the links and everything like that in the description on YouTube, and then in the show notes on all the podcast platforms. What do you kind of got going on? What are you trying to build up? Where can people find you at?
And so my personal progress in life is all based on, doing some stuff that makes me happy in life. So for me, I do a lot of streaming on Twitch. I mentioned that earlier at the start. Twitch.tv/TheWulfeman. You're gonna find gaming content primarily. It's a gaming channel, but it's more like a hangout community channel. We talk about things. Twitch terms of service being what they are. I got to keep it PG, but we just kind of do our thing, live life. It's important to remember that sometimes the goal is to just kind of enjoy things, and despite all the stuff that's all the heavy conversation, you got to live life too. So I stream. I make YouTube videos. Same thing on YouTube, TheWulfeman. It's just going to be me talking about stuff in the same way that I talk to Mark. So if you want content similar to this and you want to visit my sphere of understanding things, grab a seat and buckle up. But there's a couple different ways to do that now. I have a Discord. There's Twitter. All the same handle, by the way.
Yeah.
So
lucky.
Keep it
that's,
simple.
That's absolutely. That's incredible branding.
So there's a multitude of ways you can find me. If I can't just like speak a link into existence, but if I get that stuff, I can give it to him. He can put it in the
absolutely. It'll be in there. You're gonna need a website.
At some point,
like a hub for all your stuff. Yeah. So, but yeah, we'll definitely make sure we link it all up there. Please go check out Dave, everything that he's doing, subscribe, follow, all that sort of stuff. I appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you so much. This has been very insightful. I know that I got a lot out of it. I know our viewers will, and I'm gonna love to have you back here soon. Maybe with Pete or somebody else. We have a little round table, but I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, it was honestly just the coolest thing to be able to come on and do this. I know that's like a high level of praise for somebody who's like ultimately getting the exposure here, but I was looking forward to it. It was something I had on the to-do list when you said you were looking for guests. So thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, man. Like I said, anytime. I love having these conversations. I just want to continue to share it with people. So I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. Everyone, this has been Fueled by Progress with our guest, Dave Cupp. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you in the next one.